Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Industrial and Community Development Committee. Councilor Melville, Councilor McGinn, Councilor Rosenell, Councilor Turco, and myself. And we'd love the input from Councilor Manning Martin, Councilor Sharris, and Councilor Sasslaw. First up, we have Ms. Sharon Cameron here to talk about the ordinance, drafting an ordinance regarding covered trash receptacles and other permitting for rodent control. Ms. Cameron, please. This actually came from a request from Councilor Turco to have Sharon attend. So, Councilor Turco, do you want to preface it first, or do you want to go right into it?
You know, we can let Sharon give her presentation, and then we can discuss after. I think we're all aware of the issue at hand.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, councilors. I wanted to start with an overview of where things stand with the complaints for this year, and you can see that this year we have had a significant increase in the number of complaints, and last year was high as well. Okay. So I have drafted a proposed ordinance for your review, and I just wanted to preface it by saying that in public health we really like to focus on prevention. So a lot of what you'll see in the ordinance are efforts that are designed to prevent the growth or the disturbance of rodent populations, but there are also opportunities for mitigation that are built into the proposed ordinance as well. In developing this draft, I did work with many other city departments because many of them also regulate activities that can have an impact on the rodent population in the city. So as we go through, you'll see that most of what we've proposed are efforts to minimize sources of food and to address areas where rodents may be harboring. So the first piece of the proposal is to look at the ways we manage trash and recyclables in the city. And I would like to say that the trash issue is much, much more significant than the recycling issue, but I was asked to address both. But the proposed ordinance would require property owners to provide a sufficient number of rodent-proof covered containers to store the weekly collection of trash. It would require, and this would be a change, this would require that trash placed at curbside be put out in rodent-proof containers or waste bags that are designed to repel rodents. So that is a new piece. Another new piece is we would propose that receptacles be required to be removed from the curb and that people be responsible for picking up any incidental trash that may have been left behind after the pickup. And it clarifies that it's a property owner's responsibility to address waste issues at a property. We often receive complaints from rental properties. It is not feasible or safe for the inspectors to be going through trash to try to figure out who owns the waste, so we do hold the property owner responsible.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you. While there's a brief pause, we're discussing an ordinance we haven't received yet, so I just wanted to get this into the record. It's item 8B from the regular council package. Move to receive.
Heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Ms. Cameron, please.
So on the prevention end, we will be asking for certain types of activities that are permitted by city departments to require the submission of an integrated pest management plan as a condition of getting a permit. So within the building department, we would propose that IPM plans be required for large-scale demolition projects. Small kind of standalone residential projects are also required to do some pest control before they get a permit, but they're not required to have an ongoing plan, so that wouldn't be a change. Any renovation or construction work on abandoned properties, and that's defined in the city ordinance as properties that have been uninhabited for 6 months or more. Large-scale commercial projects and residential subdivisions. It's taken a long time for the slides to advance, and I don't know why, but
Don't worry about it. I'd still be at the first screen, but it's all right.
okay. All right, you know, I'm just going to talk through it because I can't get these slides to advance. Within the Department of Public Services, it gets a little bit more complicated. There would be a requirement for an IPM plan for soil excavation associated with projects such as sewer, drain installation or repair, and utility installation repair greater than 1,500 linear feet. There would be the ability to waive the 14-day advance IPM submission in emergencies. That discretion would lie with the Director of Public Services, and the Public Services Department estimates there'll be about 10 projects a year that fall into this category. Within the fire department, we propose that IPM plans be submitted for dumpsters. There is already a requirement under the state fire code for dumpsters greater than 6 cubic yards to be permitted by the fire department, so that piece of it is not a new requirement. What would be new is the requirement to have an IPM plan as a condition of getting that permit. A lot of dumpsters are not aware. A lot of people who have dumpsters are not aware of the existing requirements, so it's being perceived as a new requirement, but it is not. Currently, there are about 168 dumpsters of that size permitted within the city, but we do expect it to be many more once people become aware of the requirement. Within the health department, we would propose that IPM plans be required for any businesses receiving a retail food or food service establishment permit. There are about 366 of those. There are other types of establishments that have food that don't require a local health department permit. Things like food manufacturing plants, food distribution plants, breweries, and some small retail stores that don't have, that mostly have prepackaged goods. They're exempt from local permitting requirements. We would propose to include them in this ordinance. 2 landfills would be included, the transfer station, businesses that have waste vehicles that traverse the city. There are about 27 businesses and about over 100 vehicles that have what we call an OFFAL permit, OFFAL. And people who hold permits from the health department to have chickens and other type of farm animals, we would ask them to have pest control before granting that permit as well, and there are about 38 of those type of permits in the city. So that's really the prevention piece. I'm not giving up on hoping these slides advance. Okay, we just got some. And I figured it out. Okay. In terms of the mitigation piece, there is a proposal that certain types of projects be required to pay into a mitigation fund that would be used to fund rodent control activities when needed throughout the city. We currently do not have a designated rodent control line item in the health department budget. We do have, it's part of our larger outside services line item, but it's the portion of it that we use for rodent control is about $3,500 a year. So the mitigation Fee Fund, we propose that all of the projects I've just described to you that require an IPM plan, all of those projects would pay into this mitigation fund. We also propose that smaller projects that are not required to have an IPM plan pay into the fund as well. And that would include any building project that requires a building permit for earth displacement or land clearing. There were about 235 of those last year. Any soil excavation associated with sewer or utility installation or repair less than 1,500 feet, but greater than 150 feet, we would propose to pay into this fund. Those numbers were developed by DPS, and they were specifically developed to exclude the majority of residential jobs, such as people needing to replace a drain line to the street and things like that. That would not be triggered by this proposed requirement. And as I said, those funds would support contracted pest control services, as well as administrative support for collection and review of the IPM plans. If we adopted this proposal, there'd be approximately 650 to 700 IPM plans that would need to be collected and reviewed by the health department, so we would need additional administrative support in my office to review those. So within the integrated pest management plans, the proposal is they would need to be put into place a minimum of 2 weeks prior to the projects I've described, and the IPM plans would include the names and certifications of the licensed pest control operators. It would include an initial survey by that pest control operator to document whether or not there was rodent activity on the site, whether there were burrows, and whether there were conditions such as sanitation issues or vegetation issues that could support rodent activity on a site. We would want to see details about rodent control measures that would be implemented, what sort of pesticides would they use, locations of bait stations, traps, who is responsible for removing, what sort of monitoring. An important piece of it, especially in commercial establishments, is how are they going to train staff to identify signs of rodent activity, who do they report it to? And then one of the most important pieces is, again, how are they managing sources of food, water, and harborage on the site, including vegetation management. And then lastly, it would include procedures for responding to rodent complaints associated with a site or a business, including names and contact information for people who would respond to neighborhood complaints. And I want to make the point that IPM plans are not only about professional pest control. It's not designed to be something that you hire somebody, you don't worry about it, you bring in a guy and he takes care of it for you. It really needs an active involvement of management. And to give you an example with the dumpster, it's not going to be enough for us to see that they've got a pest control operator coming out to survey the dumpster once a month. We want to know who's the individual who's going to be responsible for looking at that dumpster on a daily basis and making sure that people aren't dumping, overloading it or having dumped waste to the side of it, and who's going to be responsible for calling for a pickup if they have higher volume of waste than they had anticipated, and that sort of thing. So a lot of an IPM plan is done by the manager of the facility as opposed to an outside contracted pest control service, and that's a really important message we need to get across to the businesses and other entities that would be affected by this ordinance. And then lastly, the enforcement and penalties. Each of the city departments would be responsible for enforcing these provisions for IPM plans and for paying into the mitigation fund for the permits that they issue from their offices. The health department would continue to handle any complaints about rodent activity, and we would also be responsible for collecting and reviewing the IPM plans. There are penalties of up to $300 a day for noncompliance. And again, the fines in a separate account. So that is the overview of the ordinance.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cameron. Councilors. Councilor Turco, you want to start?
Well, first, Sharon, I just want to say thank you. This is exactly what we asked for. And I know, as I look through it, every portion of it, I agree with. The only reluctance I have, and I briefly mentioned it to you before the meeting, was that the residential portion, and that's because we haven't really addressed the container issue yet, and that's on us. The recycled containers, the covered containers via cost to the resident. It sounds minimal, but some people legitimately can't afford to buy new receptacles. Other than that, I think the ordinance is great. The only thing I think we would need some guidance on is the fees. I did briefly talk to Al Tellerico, and he mentioned maybe a $50 commercial fee or a $25 residential fee for, land excavation. But I don't know what the standard is throughout cities and towns. So do you have any guidance on that we can kind of go by?
I researched what exists in a lot of other cities and towns, and a lot of cities and towns don't have an ordinance this comprehensive, so I don't have a lot of reference to share with you, but Al did share with me that specifically for the requirement, let me just get to the right page. So for instance, for the 235 projects a year that the projects that would have an earth removal permit, he proposed a residential fee of about $100 per project and a commercial fee of $250 per project, and that would generate about $28,000 in revenue based on the 2017 data from his office.
Okay, and that money would be line item directly to you specifically for rodent control?
Yeah, it doesn't, not necessarily to the health department, but within the city as a rodent control fund, yes.
Thank you. So I just want to state my own thoughts on this. This has been the better part of a year, if not more, when Councilor Manning and I first discussed it in Ward 1. And although I do think we need to make changes as a council, very few, and I apologize, that's nothing to do with the quality of your work. It's, as we discussed, it's because we have a different job to do than you do. That being said, I really would love to move forward with this ordinance sooner than later, and I think the quicker we can make these changes and get this implemented, the better for all of us. I hate to see this continually kicked down the road, and I think we first discussed this maybe 6 or 8 months ago, so I'm glad to have it here. And to my fellow councilors, I just ask that we can make the changes we want to make and move this forward to the planning board.
Tim is just clarifying something for us. Tim, if you would, please.
I don't think this is a zoning proposal. This is just an ordinance change, so it doesn't have to go to the planning board.
Okay, my fault. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Ryan, Councilor Melville, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo some of the comments made by Councilor Turco. I think that this is extremely comprehensive. I actually spoke to Sharon earlier this week, or maybe last week, when I first received it. I did have a few questions. First, on the residential side, I can see that this is going to be an implementation issue more as it is a change that we're looking at, whereas the new ordinance that was included in our packet and what we reviewed tonight is something that can be implemented due to the requirements of certain permitting. So I think that is where I think we can act a lot faster than on the residential portion, which I have some concerns on as well. With regards to that, Sharon, there's certain portions of this that would impact the city as well, correct? With regards to the dumpsters and that the city operates, I can tell you that from certain schools and whatnot that they're not necessarily covered 24/7, that the trash is exposed and available. Have you gotten any feedback from other city departments regarding what their certain specific requirements for disposal and storage?
I have, and with respect to, so there'll be Other than my department's review of the IPM plan, that's kind of really the only administrative costs. The other departments didn't think they would have administrative costs, but there would be some significant operational and capital costs for some of the other city departments to implement this, specifically for public services to implement IPM plans within the recycling facility that they have. The estimate came at about $6,000 a year. To implement IPM plans for the 16 dumpsters on city property would be about $19,000 a year. The biggest cost would be to the Park and Recreation Department for them to replace the existing barrels within their parks with ones that are designed to be rodent-proof. The initial cost for the purchase of those barrels would be about $75,000. And those are designed to be, 10 to 15-year life, but there's small costs associated with changing out the liners every few years. So there's a significant upfront capital cost. For them to implement IPM plans, there are over 40 city parks, and the cost to implement IPM plans within the 40 city parks would be about $60,000 a year.
Okay, so there's definitely some costs attributed to the city as well on these. I think as a neighbor, so I abut a city-owned property, the Wells School, and when I looked at the residential trash portion of this, which I think it is absolutely imperative that people secure their trash while they're waiting for it to be picked up during the time of the last from that week prior to pickup. Because that is really, as you've stated clearly and over the past couple times you've been here, is really the root cause of a lot of this. But the one hesitation I have on implementation of a fine and some of the other portions that are punitive with this is, I come out and I see the dumpster at the Welsh School that is filled and being picked up appropriately, and there's, the operations are appropriate, but that there could be some sort of punitive action taken against the resident while the city might not be upholding its portion. It's also just concerning just because that, we don't want to be, the city does not want to be the point of some of these issues coming up for the neighbors that abut them. And that's obviously, that's a charge on us to pay attention to and to kind of evaluate those fees. My last point on this is, and this is fantastic, and I understand when you're coming up with a regulation or a new regulation or ordinance, you either start with a line item and build it, or you throw everything up there and say this is the best, this is the most comprehensive it can be, and you kind of backtrack from there based on what the implementation is going to cost and everything from there. One thing I like to do is look and say, all right, who would be in compliance and who wouldn't be in compliance based on if we approve this today. With the residential portion, I've been paying attention since we got the packet, and very few people would be following this to a T. And I think the implementation, the education portion, and also, you're seeing people with the recycling emblem with the city of Peabody on there using the older ones, which are, that's been discussed before. And I have a hard time seeing that as that would be something that we could take action on somebody for. But with regards to the permitting side, I think that this is something that we really can move forward. And my last question for you is: is there any other pending, information from other city departments with regards to this permitting side? You had mentioned that you had gotten information from the fire department and the building inspector. Is there anybody else that you're still waiting to hear back from? Because, I know Councilor Turco wants to move on this, and I think that he makes a great point on it. Is there anybody else you're waiting on?
No.
Very good. Thank you very much for doing this. You are an expert in this, and you've been really educated me since I've gotten on the council, and I appreciate all your time on this. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Melville. Councilor McGinn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would just repeat the comments made by my fellow councilors about your hard work on this. It's a great output, and the fact that you have evaluated kind of best practices in so many other municipalities, it shows in the output here. I too have concerns about the financial impact on residents. But at some point, we need to do something. You know, again, Councilor Turco has said it a few times. We've been kind of kicking this one down the road a little bit. I think with good reason, because it takes time to figure out what's going to actually work. So kind of a knee-jerk reaction to the problem wasn't going to serve us well. But I think we have something here that the experts are telling us can't work. And if we carve out the residential piece now, we're probably carving out the biggest contributing factor to the problem. I mean, when I get complaints, they're generally around residential trash. That seems to be the driving factor. And I'd ask the director if she maybe comment on that, if that's my opinion, but is that valid based on the complaints that we've had?
I would say the majority are from about residential properties, but we do get a significant number about commercial facilities, particularly restaurants. So that is something that we incorporate into our routine compliance checks as well as our complaint response.
Thank you. So the majority are related to residential issues, and I kind of hate to avoid that piece of it at this stage of the game. I think we need to do something, and you know, I think Councilor Turco and Councilor Melville, I think I would imagine you're viewing it as I am, that you know, people are going to have to go out and buy these receptacles to be in compliance, and that's going to be the cost. So what I was thinking we should do would be to kind of leverage you know, the collective volume of the city residents and JRM and ask DPS and the health department and the mayor's office to get with some retailers like Lowe's or Home Depot and see if we can come up with a discounted container available to residents that would comply with the ordinance if we did in fact enact the residential piece of it. So it's not going to eliminate the financial impact, but it could mitigate it by, you know, everybody going on. And I think, frankly, we might get a better result that way because, you know, now it's not everybody's interpretation of the ordinance. It's DPS and the health department saying this is fully compliant, and it's also, by the way, the least expensive alternative you're going to get to be in compliance. I mean, part of what I heard in one of the prior presentations was you know, having these lids that aren't attached is a problem. We've all seen it. You know, you get a heavy wind. It's just a matter of time before the trash barrel cover blows down the road and gets run over by a car, gets lost, and now we're back to the same place we were with uncovered trash and uncovered recycling. So I think that Peabody container, or these receptacles, should be like we see in a lot of other municipalities, which is with an attached lid, so that we don't run into that problem. So that would be my suggestion. I've got a motion that I would make to move that piece of it forward if there was some consensus around that idea. But I'd like to hear from other councilors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. Councilor Sasslaw, please.
Thank you. Just continuing on Councilor McGinn's thoughts, Home Depot or Lowe's also, I bet even reaching out directly to manufacturers, if we're going to be buying thousands of them, maybe find out who we bought the original open green containers. But I echo your sentiments and support that we definitely need to go down that road and get some type of competitive bidding, and hopefully maybe GRM and their expertise could help us out with that too. I want to thank you, Sharon. You know, I do get, you know, if you go back to the first screen, I think it was Wood 1 had the most complaints, and Wood 5 was you know, right behind. And every time I've gotten a complaint, people are more frustrated, they're concerned, and I've always reached out to you, Sharon, and to be quite frank with you, I never usually hear back from them because you answer their questions and your department does a good job, and I thank you for that. Looking at the document in front of me, I just had a couple comments and questions. At item F, permits for keeping of animals. You know, a lot of people look at the animals, they look at the chickens as pets, and you know that, and I know that. And my only concern in reading the way that's worded is, my concern is that it looks like if you're already, it looks like it's kind of grandfathered. If you're already in, you're okay, but if you want to come for something new, you need to have, it has to be assessed by a licensed pest control operator. If you're coming for renewal, they may need a updated assessment and treatment plan, and I'm just a little bit concerned about that. I think we should treat everybody the same because it can be a little bit subjective. So I just think you open yourself up a little bit to that. So I would just recommend that whether it be new or renewal, they should all be treated the same. That's my commentary on that. Being in Ward 5, I did have a question. A lot of that is Route 1. I get a lot of, you've helped me a lot on Winona Street. There's restaurants that are on Route 1. You talked about having someone who's a point person at a restaurant, maybe a manager or someone who's there. So do you envision this as a standard form that would be filled out when the restaurant opens up so that you would, if there was an issue, you would have someone on file? And continuing that, do you see it enforcement with the restaurant specifically being proactive or reactive? So you're going to have a form, and then if there's an issue, you'd send out one of your health inspectors, and they would bring the form and say, okay, I see Mr. Brown is here. Mr. Brown, can we talk to you about it? Or, you know, because we want to just see what you're doing. Or Mr. Brown, we came out today because we've had some issues with X street off, that's, you know, abuts your restaurant. I'm just curious how you see that playing out, the enforcement of it, proactive, reactive, and as I said, you have somebody with standard form that you're seeing the restaurant fill out?
So we actually implemented the requirement for IPM plans for restaurants 2 years ago because we saw this issue and we thought they were a significant contributing player. So they're already under that requirement and have been submitting them. So we have both components, proactive and reactive. The proactive approach is we do routine unannounced compliance inspections at all food permit holders, and the number of times a year we do it depends on the risk level of the establishment, but they all do get routine unannounced inspections. So that's kind of a way we can catch them, but we also respond to every complaint we receive, and we have a complaint management database. Everything gets input into the database, assigned out to the inspectors, and then tracked. So we have both pieces. Does that answer the question? It
does.
Okay.
It does. And also, being where where the floor is somewhat open here for the subject, I want to touch upon Park and Recs. You know, Park and Recs, it's a very difficult situation. I believe the feeling of Park and Recs is that it's a carry-in, carry-out on the bike trail. But I have, if we're going to be honest about it, you know, I get pictures sent to me of people who walk the bike trail, and unfortunately, you know, people drive over the speed limit. People leave trash on the bike trail, and I like to be able to try and resolve this. I mean, we had a local business right now who has donated poop dispensers. Well, what happens is now residents are using the poop dispensers to put the trash in, so it's defeating the purpose. It's filling up quickly, and you know, I think what happens is we talk about the residents having to come up with the money, which I agree is never easy, but I also believe we have to put our money where our mouth is too, and that's some of the things that we talked about, and you uncovered it, Councilor Melville, with some of the costs. I mean, you know, if we're going to ask the residents, I think we also have to carve out some type of funding in the budget to deal with some of the issues that are on the table, because I also want to see this go forward. And obviously, the residential piece of it, to me, that's a no-brainer with the flying, you know, recyclables going all over the neighborhood. But I appreciate the work you've done. As I said, I would like to go forward with it. I would also like to try and deal with this Park and Rec issue. And you talked about the barrels. I think it was 78,000 initial barrels that are already in the parks. And I think that when the public goes down and they see those barrels, they say, this community is making an investment. They're seeing there's an issue. You know, it's just like, you know, when you pave a street, people want to see how their taxes are used. It's the same thing with the barrels. And I think that the bike path, at some point, we really need to deal with that issue. And I think this is the time to do it if we're going to go forward with asking barrels be placed at all the parks across the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sasslaw. Just 1 second, please. I have to ask Ms. Cameron a question. Councilor Sharris, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, Ms. Cameron, you probably hear from, I can guarantee, that every ward councilor here once or twice a week about this issue. Maybe myself a little more than that, but it is a huge issue, as we spoke about it many, many times before, and your plan is in detail. And I know it just didn't come together overnight. You had a lot of people working on this, and it is a financial impact on both the city, or all three, the city, the businesses, and the residential. But almost every complaint that I've gotten from a resident has, without pointing a finger, said their neighbor, they suspect, is causing the issue. And as neighbors want to be good neighbors, they don't want to point the fingers, but they're saying, listen, I've been doing my job, I've been trying to do everything I can, but I don't think my neighbor gets it, and where they put their trash out or where they keep their trash. So, and again, as I said many times before, it's a whole city problem, and every neighbor has to, combine their efforts to combat this. And that's why I think it is important, even though it is a financial impact on the residents, to do something with the barrels. Personally, I hate to see trash bags lining the streets and not in barrels when you see them torn open, and especially when you see times they're out there well before the time designated to be out there. And there, people will complain, but we have to take a hard stance. This is very similar to a lot of other issues we had in the city, that we had to take a hard stance, and it was a financial impact, but unless we did it, we were just, fooling ourselves. I did talk to JRM today on another issue, and I did inform them that I think they need to take a step up. I don't like when I'm driving behind a dumpster and dump truck, and I'm seeing the guys throwing the barrels to the curb, and sliding them across the sidewalks. I think they need to take a stand in getting those barrels upright. When trash doesn't come totally out of the barrel and it lays it down on the ground, it's going to come out. And even when they dump the barrels into the back of the dumpster and trash falls on the ground, I'm going to be expecting you, if we take this step to enforce our residents and businesses to do the right thing, that your folks are going to be picking up the trash they drop too. So I do see that as a major impact on it. I think with the purchasing of the barrels too, maybe looking with our purchaser, Doucette here in the city, to see what kind of costs we can get. I know in the beginning we did it through Brooksby Farm. I think the recycling bins, you could have purchased them from Brooksby Farm, the stand itself. So, but I do believe we need to take action, and we need to take action now, because it's only getting worse. And I got to tell you, I'm tired of hearing people saying, well, the city's not doing anything about it. Well, we can prove them wrong. We can do something about it. And we can, unfortunately, it's not years ago where people always picked up what they had laying in the ground, or doing the proper thing with trash and picking up trash that's on the ground. Those old days seem to be gone with some of the folks here. So I think we need to take a strong stance with the barrels. I would ask that the barrels will be appropriate size. I know there's some seniors who have a difficult time with some of the larger barrels that's out there. I know most of the large ones are on wheels, but we want to be cautious that we don't have barrels that they can't be transporting if we purchase them ourselves, back and forth. And again, it is a huge cost on the city, but we need to be the one front and center. If it's a cost on the residents, it's going to be a cost on the city departments. We just have to do it. I'd be shameful to think that we implement this only on the residents and not on the city itself. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Councilor Sharris. Councilor Manning Martin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sharon, we've certainly gotten our money's worth out of you this year. So for everything you've done, not only on this subject, but many others, you've been quite a resource for the council, as my colleagues have mentioned, so I thank you. And I just wanted to reinforce a couple of excellent points made by councilors already. Councilor Melville's point is an excellent one, that there's kind of, and you've presented it in a way to say, well, we can implement, you know, most of this, but things that need to be worked on later is the portion about pretty much how we deal with public dumpsters and municipal buildings and the school department. And I think, you know, Councilor Melville brings out a great point, is I'm not comfortable rolling it out separately like that without holding everybody to a standard and a similar standard, because, you know, we need to be leaders that lead by example, not do as I say, not as I do. Nobody likes that. I certainly, and I'm sure my colleagues, don't want to be lawmakers or ordinance makers that operate that way. Nobody likes that, and it's unfair. So I would rather see us iron that out and roll forward, that everybody's held to a standard and that the city does its part. And if residents are in this, we're in this together too. So that's one suggestion. The other thing, Councilor Sharist as well brings up a very good point, that everything on here seems to be resident, identifying the resident as responsible. And an example would be if JRM or whatever our vendor is at whatever time isn't held accountable and isn't held to certain standards, they're just going to throw it because, oh, the residents are going to be responsible for it, and the trash will be everywhere, and the poor resident is left to pick up after the JRM or the trash collector. And that's unacceptable, because if we indicate that JRM or the vendor will be held responsible, then residents will record them and say, this was not me, you're not fining me $300, this was, and so we need to be able to hold the contractor accountable. When it's not the resident, we need to give the resident a chance to defend themselves with an, you know, unfair fee. So that's another suggestion on my part. And lastly, what hasn't been mentioned, and unless I missed it, do you have anything in here indicating that we are going to give a warning or 2 warnings? I didn't see that.
It is not defined that well, and it's not defined in the ordinance that way. We have separately within the Health Department a ticketing ordinance that lays out how we assess penalties and for different types of infractions, and we do have a structure that says first offense would be a written warning, second offense is typically $100, third offense is $300. So we can spell that out more clearly here, so it is, but that was the intention, is that would be a gradated system of penalties.
Excellent, because last thing you want, because I know in Boston, if you get a $300 fine for leaving a bag of trash not in a barrel, as Councilor Charis points out, and you get a $300 fine on your door, and then you go down to refute it, and they say, we warned you twice, and they have the dates and the documents. So as long as you have that, and that we can, again, showing residents that we're being fair and not heavy-handed, that we're all on the same page working together. Those are my comments, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Manning Martin. Councilor Rossignol, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, Ms. Cameron, as always, you go above and beyond, and you have all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed when it comes to anything that this council or anybody asks of you. So thank you for an extremely comprehensive ordinance. Along the lines of what Councilor Martin just mentioned, my big fear is, and I agree with the rest of the council, that this needs to be done quickly, but it needs to be done the right way. My fear is that the $300 fee is a little bit heavy-handed as a first offense, so I'm extremely happy to hear that you're going to tier it. My suggestion would be to only give out warnings for a year and give people ample time to go out and purchase barrels, so that with the holidays coming, and I know winter's coming, and I know that that's a trying time, I just want to make sure people have enough time to actually go out and purchase these things. And if they don't have enough time, you can't just sit there and say, well, I warned you last week, and I'm warning you again this week, and here's your fine 2 weeks later, when they're trying to save up for the holidays. So I would like at least the payment structure or the fee structure or the penalty structure to be postponed for a short time so that people have ample time to wrap their head around what they need to go buy, have the time and the money and the resources to go and actually purchase these things. So that's my comment, at least on that portion. Are we currently handing out recycling bins as they are constituted now, to your knowledge?
I believe they're available, but I think for the most part, they're encouraging people to get other receptacles and get the stickers for them, but I believe those open bins are still available.
Okay. So in my mind, I think we have to cease that immediately, because it makes no sense whatsoever if we're handing out a receptacle that is literally going against an ordinance that we're trying to pass. So as Councilor Manning Martin mentioned, I think we have to make sure we have our house in order before we then go and ask residents and businesses to comply, because if we're asking them to comply first and we're not even taking care of our own issues, then I think that that's really not the proper way to roll out an ordinance. But as far as this is written and how comprehensive it is, I think it's perfect, and I think we absolutely should move forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Rosendahl. Councilor Manning Martin, please.
Yes, I just also wanted to, and I appreciate your remarks, Councilor Rosendahl. I just wanted to kind of get back to the exigency that Councilor Turco has put on this, that if we were to roll it out more slowly, like too slowly, I appreciate, we want to bring people along, but we have to remember that these are rats and that they multiply at such a rate that's phenomenal that probably a lesser period of rolling this out would probably be beneficial, since it takes, what is it, they have a litter in about, 40 days? They're ready to have another litter, so, and that's part of the problem. So just that we maintain the exigency that Councilor Turco has put on this, I would suggest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Manning Martin. Any other councilors before I make a suggestion? Councilor McGinn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the director. When you were gathering the numbers there that from the various departments on the costs that you gave Councilor Melville, were you able to assess from them, or could you estimate how much time it might take them to get into compliance if we ask them to move on this? Given the comments made by Councilor Rosendahl and Councilor Manning Martin, I mean, if we're going to hold off on a part until the city's in compliance, we ought to have some sense of what that time frame actually looks like.
We didn't actually discuss that. I don't think it would be that difficult to roll out the permitting piece, although I think it would make sense for the different departments to roll that into, well, like we have an annual permitting cycle, so the establishments we permit are already complying with it. So for the building permits, I think they could implement that in fairly short order with a few months lead time. I think the biggest challenge would be for the Parks Department to get the barrels. There's a lot of manpower that goes into the installation of those barrels, so I think they would probably be the most challenged department to comply.
Thank you. So, I mean, there's two pieces of it, right? The implementation you talk about with permitting is a function of the ordinance, but the barrels for the park department would be, kind of us leading by example, as was mentioned by other councilors. That's not a function of the ordinance. So it's that portion of it that's not a function of the ordinance that I'm most concerned with right now. And you think that's potentially a relatively short time frame, or did I understand that correctly? To get, I mean, we're talking about 40 parks, some number of barrels. I don't want to put you on the spot, Wayne. I know it's not your department, so.
Yeah, I think it'll be a manpower issue for them to get those installed, and I don't know what the lead time is for ordering, so, you know, I don't really have a strong answer for that question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. We're going to have to, okay, but, excuse me?
Chairman, just an informational only, the understanding what they would need for the Parks Department as a barrel cover.
Okay, my proposal is going to encompass all that, so unless it's specific, go ahead.
I'm just looking for an understanding of what exactly is the rec department going to need because we talk about a rodent-proof barrel with a cover. Is the issue is not having a cover, or is it the barrel itself?
Suggesting is we're going to work that out. Thank you. What I'd like to do, and I got offline, I asked Ms. Cameron if she was willing to chair a working group of the Health Department, Department of Public Works, the Mayor's Office, and a member of the council, and come up with the nuts and bolts of this ordinance. There's a lot to do here. There's a lot of moving parts. And Sharon was gracious enough to say she would be glad to do it. So if it's okay by the members of the committee, we're going to keep this in subcommittee. Ms. Cameron will start the ball rolling on getting the committee together, the small working group committee together. I'm wondering if there's any councilors that would like to serve on this subcommittee. If not, I'll do it. All right, then I will be the council member of the subcommittee, and Ms. Cameron, yourself, maybe Mr. Ryder from the Mayor's Office, Department of Public Works. Is there anyone else you think that, in the Parks Department? Excuse me? Yeah, we'll bring them in as we need them, yeah. The building inspector's office. So you comfortable to move forward on that? All right, so if there is no, yes, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So do you envision as part of that working group this outreach to retailers that could help mitigate the...
Everything we talked about.
Everything we talked about.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If there's no further questions, Ms. Cameron, thanks so much for everything you do for us, honestly. It's wonderful. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. Meeting's adjourned.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to start the meeting of the Municipal Safety Committee. I'm joined by Councilor Gould, Councilor Manning Martin, Councilor Melville, and Councilor Turco. Those are the members of the committee. First up on the agenda is item A, request by Tuma and Elias Realty Group, 3, 5, and 7 Central Street, turn portion of North Central Street into a two-way street. Before we do that, we have a late communication on everyone's desk from Rich Benevento out of Worldwide Tech. Can I have a motion to receive late communication?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
For the motion, anyone all in favor, any opposed? The vote. I'll turn over to Attorney Kelty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee Chairman. My name is John Kelty. I'm an attorney. I practice law at 40 Lowell Street in Peabody, Massachusetts, and I'm not familiar with the late communication. However, I will, ask to receive a copy, and I understand that that communication suggests that World Tech has not completely completed its review in the total vetting of this suggestion of making the corner of Pulaski and North Central Street two-way. I believe that there was a meeting in which it occurred. Actually, I was not in attendance at the meeting. It occurred in late July, early August. I was about to go on vacation, and I spent a little time off the chart. However, we were installing an island at the entry to Pulaski Street, which we thought would satisfy concerns that World Tech had. However, they have not acknowledged that in the October 22nd missive to the council, and as such, I'd be happy to, continue this matter to a later event so that we could satisfy the issues presented by concerns of World Tech, because I understand they're doing the large project which will be in the greater interest of the city of Peabody in this general area. So I'm satisfied and happy to continue this matter till we hear further from World Tech with respect to the design changes we've proposed.
Thank you, Councilor Kelty. Councilor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Attorney Kelty. And just to expound on that, we're investing with some grants and some city money, $10 million on the redesign of Central Street and all of its adjoining streets, Tremont, Pulaski, all the way up to the mouth of Gardner Street, and the whole Wilson Square area is going to be all reconfigured. And we don't even have a design yet from World Tech as to what they recommend for any of those streets, let alone what the North Central Street project is going to look like. So Attorney Kelty is being gracious in allowing us to postpone it, but in reality, we got to think in the big picture what's beneficial for the city of Peabody. I would love to see that Wilson Square corner redeveloped, but we're in no position right now to act on any one-way, two-way street change. And I would like to table this in subcommittee until we get some more information from World Tech, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
The council before I table? Okay, we'll table this item and we'll keep it in subcommittee.
If I could just ask a simple question, could I get the World Tech commentary sent over to my office? Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Item 8B. Excuse me, item B, not 8B. Item B, request from Steve Ferrante, 13 Gardner Street, regarding immediate need for increased police presence on Gardner Street. In your packet, you have a communication from Mr. Ferrante, and this time, if you'd like to come up and address the council.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. Ferrante, you're more than welcome to come up, but it's up to you. Yes, please, right up to the podium. There's a number of neighbors here that are in Councilor Mitsoulis's ward that live on Pulaski or live in any of the adjoining streets off of live on Gardner in the adjoining streets that abut Gardner. And they're here because there's been a long history of commercial vehicles that using Gardner Street to make deliveries into Salem, and it gets tiresome after a while to have a tractor-trailer truck that's ripping down branches in front of your house on Gardner Street and trying to back out of your driveway, and it's not a truck route. And Mr. Ferrante will expound on it more, but I just wanted to set the background. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gould. And just if you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Sure thing. Steve Ferrante, 13 Gardner Street. I want to thank the Municipal Safety Committee and, of course, Councilor Gould for facilitating this long overdue opportunity to protect the longtime citizens of totally residential Gardner Street, which was once the home of the first mayor of Peabody and other influential citizens that helped shape and influence Peabody as far back as the early 1900s. Now, I also look around. I do have some neighbors that I thank you very much for showing up. This is just, it's been going on a long time. Listen, so I took a couple notes. I'll be brief because I also have other neighbors that may want to get up and speak. Some of the folks, my neighbors have experienced, financial hardships, if you will, whether it be, as Councilor Gould mentioned, wires being ripped off houses. We have a few people that had their vehicles hit, whether backing out of the driveway. So they suffered financial hardship. My family has called Gardner Street home for 51 years. There are several residents, some who are here, I see Bill, who are here this evening, and Joe, who have lived in our beautiful street for even longer. So, I mean, we've been there a long time. It's not like, moving into Logan Airport a week ago and start complaining about airplane noise. We've been there a long, long time, 51 years. Tree-lined Gardner Street is remembered by several generations of people who have either lived on or driven down our beautiful street. It is no secret, a major contributor to the increased vehicle and truck traffic is Salem, Massachusetts. Salem is well into a massive buildup and expansion of the Peabody Essex Museum, a world-class facility that attracts people from all over. New hotels, a multitude of new and existing restaurants, and a tourism organization working on attracting year-round business. Without any intervention by the Peabody Police now, this will only lead to added turmoil for our totally residential Gardner Street. Let's be clear. Gardner Street has inherited a much greater burden of additional traffic since the decision was made to reduce the traffic lanes in our downtown business district. Despite this massive traffic increase, we've remained quiet. We can no longer remain silent, and we seek immediate and meaningful discussions with the Peabody Police Department and, if necessary, municipal safety. The residents of Gardner Street want to be a part of the solution, as we know better than anyone the key times of truck traffic and previous mitigation efforts that did work. In business, I ask my customers what keeps them up at night. Peabody police officers need to be aware of the truck traffic and speeding issues that keep us up at night. We already have truck exclusion signs and fines that have been on the books for a long time. They are meaningless without enforcement. Taking care of the truck traffic will minimize the speeding through our residential street via increased police presence and static traffic surveillance. I want to thank you for the time and look forward to an immediate resolution and meaningful dialogue in cooperation with our Peabody Police Department. Thank you for your time. I also know I have some residents that want to come up and say a few things, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferrante. I'd like to ask any other residents who'd like to come up, just please state your name and your address for the record.
Yes, good evening. My name's Tom DiPaolo at 15 Gardner Street, Peabody. There's another thing that aggravates our neighborhood. Back many years ago, the Municipal Safety Committee, our Community Development Department, and the City Council all approved a plan to redesignate the direction of 114 off of Gardner Street and down Central Street and Main Street. This plan was adopted and encouraged by Fay, Spofford, and Thorndike study at the time. And we also had the State Highway Department come in and made a special study. They both highly recommended the removal of 114 from Gardner Street, the only totally residential street on Route 114. Peabody had to get the approval of Salem to get the thing moved. Even though we approved it, we had difficulty in getting Salem to respond. Several requests for meetings were sent by this committee and others, and they never responded. If they responded, they said they couldn't make it for one reason or another. After approximately 2 years of unsuccessful communication with the city of Salem, it just basically died on the vine. but it's still a vote that sits on the books. You voted to take 114 off of Gardner. I'm asking that we have any discussions with Salem, that this discussion be renewed. The situations have even gotten worse from the time this approval was made. Gardner Street has over 17,000 vehicles a day going down. A totally residential street. I'm sure you all live on residential streets. That's 6 million vehicles a year that go down our street. Not a very conducive influence for a neighborhood. I won't spend a lot of time getting on the 114. I just want to let you know it's something that happened in the past, and I think something that somehow ought to be regenerated, and hopefully can come up with some alternative plan for 114. I know there's pros and cons about sending it downtown and things like that, but there's a lot of advantages. There's pros and there's cons of sending it downtown. The other item that has aggravated our situation and has grown over a period of time are signs that are being erected on streets purposely directing traffic down Gardner Street. Remember, Gardner Street is a totally residential street. There's Essex County, scenic byways, Salem visitor centers, Peabody and Essex Museum signs, Salem State University, other historical Salem signs, not only placed on 128, but placed on Andover Street. Who approved the placement of these signs? There were motions made in the past by Councilor Garabedian questioning who made them, and he made an effort to have some signs removed. When we had a tour that he attended, he promised all those signs would be taken down. They don't belong sending more traffic, commercially oriented traffic, down on Gardner Street. There were a couple of signs taken down, but somehow, again, it's got lost in the way here. I'd like to know who's making these approvals and how is it being made. It is contradictory to a prudent and logical decision. You would never set up a sign purposely directing traffic down any other residential street. For crying out loud, you know that if you only redirect traffic, detour traffic down a residential street because of construction, etc., your phone starts ringing off the hook. What the heck has happened? We have to live with that situation. So I don't want to spend a lot of time, but I'd like to have this committee start considering and ask questions. Why is this being done and who's approving it? No sign should purposely direct traffic down a residential street. We have many other streets and you got to come to decisions, but I don't know who's approving it. That ends back.
Thank you, sir. Any other residents, neighbors like to come up and speak? Just please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mary Ellen Smiley, and I live at 27 Gardner Street. And I have the misfortune of working in Salem, but living in Peabody. 4 years ago, I was backing out of my driveway. I drove a full-sized conversion van with a full tank of gas. As I was backing out, as I've lived there 26 years. I looked very carefully from side to side, always wait for the light to turn red on the other end, on the Pulaski Street end. There was no one there. I went to back out when suddenly a dump truck came hurtling down the street. The back of the truck bit into the back side of my van, pulled it out of the driveway, and flipped it onto the front lawn with me inside. Broke 3 of the wheels, deformed the entire van, and broke every window. By the grace of God, I was fine. He was going so fast, he couldn't stop. So he went down, turned around, and came back. And his first words to me were, "I thought I killed you." My husband, who also was backing out of the driveway at the same time, couldn't believe his eyes. In the 25 years we have lived there, it used to be a great neighborhood. We moved there, I had a 5-year-old child. I wasn't afraid. I'm afraid now. The trucks hurtle down that street at speeds. Because I used to pay for claims, automobile claims, and I knew that when you backed out of the driveway, it's your fault no matter what in Massachusetts. But this guy was not supposed to be there, and he was at speed. I went and had it and asked for arbitration and talked to the judge. And the judge conceded that he had to have been moving at a great speed in order to pull a vehicle of that weight and size out of the driveway and flip it onto the front lawn. I was basically sitting in the car looking at my front door. Took a tow truck quite a while to get it off. It's been getting worse. I see big trucks, I see little trucks, and they're all moving at speed. Now, at some point, someone is going to get killed, and I just pray that it isn't one of our neighbors. This has gotten out of hand. The driver in the case of this dump truck was not, when the police came, he was not cited for being on that road. And the sign, which was at the head of the street, was so faded out you couldn't read it, and had been like that for years. Now, house across the street, a new couple has moved in. They have children. What's going to happen one of these days when a car hits one of those kids? Please consider keeping these trucks off our road and police it. And yes, it is a car, it is Salem, unfortunately. And believe me, Halloween in Salem is truly hell. And becomes hell in Peabody because it backs up on to 114 in front of my house from all the people going in. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Joe Michaud, 19 Gardner Street, Peabody. And I'm in my 55th year of living on Gardner Street. Traffic, I know, is terrible, normally cars, but we got cars coming up there like flying, speeding down that road. And there's a lot of older people coming in and out of those driveways, and one of these days somebody's going to be killed. The trucks are terrible. Part of the problem I see, you're coming up Pulaski Street going on to Gardner, there's plenty of signage there that tells the trucks that the truck route is straight down Pulaski Street. And if you come in from the other end of Salem, there's no sign there outside of the one that's right at the island. So a truck is already committed to make that turn. Probably doesn't know it. He should know it because he came that way going into Salem. But we don't have any patrol whatsoever. I don't know how many meetings we've come down about truck traffic down here. And after we have the meetings, we might have a patrol out there for maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks to see somebody there. Then you don't see no one. I've had police cars come down that street there with trucks on the road, never stop the truck. I've had detailed policemen standing there, and I was working out in the front yard, trucks going by. I asked him to start. He says, I'm on a detail. Well, my idea, if that police officer can wear a uniform, his duty is to the safety of the people there. Whether he's working a detail or not, it's his responsibility. He should be doing his duty and stopping these truckers. I mean, I don't know what else we can do about it. I understand the traffic in itself. I now can't even get out of my driveway to make a left turn anymore. It's all blocked up morning, noon, and probably about 2 or 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours at noontime, and about 3 hours in the evening. And it's a shame, but I know we can't do anything about the number of cars on a road. It seems like today, in my old days, we're lucky we had one car in a family. Now it's everybody that's got a license has an automobile. You see front of homes all torn up, making driveways instead of to park all these vehicles. But I wish something could be done about the trucking and maybe a little signage on the Margin Street end of the street to inform truckers before they make that turn that they know it's not a left turn option. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Steve Ferranti again. You know, Joe brings up some very good points. Ladies and gentlemen, municipal safety, we realize we live on a public road. and Lord knows we get our share of traffic, but to get the trucks on top of it, but most importantly, the lack of enforcement. And I see the sergeant here. Trust me, this is not adversarial. We want to work with you. Years ago, they used to put a net down the end of Margin and Gardner Street as a plastic barrier that they would put up, that the truck would come from Salem on Margin Street, but that barrier prevented the truck from swinging far enough. There was a simple solution, and it also added an extra level of safety for a pedestrian walking across on Margin Street onto Gardner Street, to possibly go to Treadwell's, which we all did. You know, you look at, I'll go down Endicott Street in Danvers. What do I see? I see a police car. That constant presence is in my brain, and I think anybody else that drives around here, the constant visual presence of the police. So if I go 35 on Endicott Street in Danvers, I know I'm going to get pinched. So I go 30 miles an hour, the speed limit. We need police presence. A sidewalk. We had a sidewalk a couple years ago, right by, was it 27 or 29 Gardner Street. It gave a visual perception that this is a street that people walk on. It's not a constant throughway. So there's some traffic mitigation, things like that can help out. You know, we don't want the flashing sign that's going to be flashing in somebody's living room, you know, that you're going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. We need some good old-fashioned enforcement. And it'll work, because it'll get the word out there, the perception out there that trucks, you better stay off Gardner Street. I'm almost done. A couple months ago, there was an accident up around 66 Gardner Street. A car had hit a tree and hit some other cars. I think the woman had some sort of, reaction to whatever, medication. Well, so I walked down from my house, being the nosy neighbor that I am, walked down to make sure everybody's okay. Well, I'm standing there right by the traffic island by Abington going towards the end of Gardner Street, and I see 3 trucks coming down the street. You know, they all turned down Burnham Road because they saw the police. So the trucks know they're not supposed to be there. Why? Because the city of Peabody spent $7,000 to put those big, enormous signs in front of St. Joe's Church, and then the other one down in front of the dry cleaner on Margin Street. So I know they see the signs. They know they're not supposed to be there. But they scattered like cockroaches, those trucks, when they came down and saw the police there. It's a simple fix. Thank you for your time, and once again, we look forward to working with the police department. We've got remedies that'll work, and I'm sure you folks do too. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. At this time, Sergeant Hawkins, I know you were here and you're familiar with the situation. Would you like to come up and address the council before I open it up to the councils?
Good evening. In relation to the exclusion of heavy trucks, we have a few issues as far as enforcing that. Not that we don't want to, but right now our hands are tied. The ordinance as it was originally written in 1969, I believe, called for a weight restriction of approximately 10,000 pounds. However, when that ordinance got moved over to the new ordinances and changed from 1523 to 1927, it appears as though something was left off, and now it only says exclusion of heavy and commercial vehicles on certain streets. And specifically, no vehicles used or designed for the transportation of goods, wares, or merchandise shall enter or pass over any of the following streets or parts of streets. Gardner Street, either direction between Pulaski Street and Margin Street. That's a very broad description. That would include a Toyota Corolla with the commercial plates and the name Merry Maids on it. We can't enforce that even unless we watch it travel from Pulaski to Margin Street without stopping to service anybody on that street or the abutting streets. So I do take some solace in what you said as far as no enforcement, but at one point somebody on Gardner Street called me and told me that they watched 2 trucks go down the street yesterday and a police car follow the truck and not stop it. I was that police car and I stopped both of them in front of Treadwell's Ice Cream because, and I'm not saying it was you, it was somebody on Gardner Street. I stopped both of those trucks because they described them and I was like, no, I have the citations. But I can't stop the truck until I can prove that it didn't service somebody, no matter what truck it is. Somebody mentioned a Coca-Cola truck. I know it's not going to a house there, but I'm violating his civil rights if I stop him before he does not stop someplace there. As far as that, we've already started working on, we've gotten the permit from Mass DOT that we currently hold from 1969. I believe that is here someplace. The permit allows, like I said, the 10,000-pound weight restriction. We don't have that currently on our books. So Captain Richardson and myself are in the process of rewriting that to submit it to the council and submit it to the city solicitor for approval so that we can actually enforce what the spirit of the law is supposed to be. I don't think anybody here wants us stopping every Honda Civic that goes down there with a commercial plate on it because it's registered to a business. I think the spirit of what we want is the trucks. I'm not sure exactly whether or not it was left off intentionally or if it was an typographical error. If it's determined that it's supposed to be there and it's put back in, we may not have to rewrite the ordinance at all. It may just have to be amended. I'm not 100% sure on that. As far as the enforcement, we have been out there almost daily, at least the traffic division that works 8 to 4. I have mentioned it to the early morning shift to try and get there earlier, as it was brought to my attention recently that the trucks traffic starting approximately 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning and going through the rush hour afternoon. With the new union contract we do have one traffic guy that works a couple of days a week from 4 to midnight. I've had him out there a couple times. But again, you may not see the vehicles being stopped because they have to watch them travel from one end to the other. So you got to take my word that they are stopping trucks when they can. But the other issue is, like I said, we don't have an actual ordinance we can enforce. So it's more so an educational thing of, hey, by the way, you can't be here. Please don't let me see you here again. And hope that they follow through on that because I can't write them a ticket unless they're doing something else wrong. As far as speeding, we have put guys out there running radar. We will continue to do so. I did suggest, I believe we had a conversation, I suggested putting the radar board out there temporarily just to get them to slow down initially. I was told that was not wanted on the street. So it didn't go out there. I'm not sure as far as, I don't remember. I don't think I worked when you had the net you spoke of. I don't even know what you're talking about with that. So I don't know if that's still an option or not. With that, I don't know if anyone has any other questions.
Thank you, Sergeant Hawkins. I'll open up to the floor. Council Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to deal with the immediate and then go backwards. Sergeant Hawkins is here because Captain Richards was unavailable tonight. And thank you, Jim, for everything you've done to this point. But, I don't want to put you on the spot, but a Coca-Cola truck on Gardner Street's not stopping at 66 Gardner Street and delivering a case of Coke. We don't need to question, and you've been wonderful, we don't need to question whether he's going to go the full length of Gardner Street because, as Mr. DiPaolo said, it's a total residential street. Cisco Foods at 6:30 in the morning going down Gardner Street is not delivering food product to 85 Gardner Street. He's on his way to Salem, Marblehead, and we don't need to question why he's on, or even question whether we're going to violate his civil rights. Red Bull tractor-trailer truck is not making a stop at 101 Gardner Street. He's going all the way down Gardner and taking a right on Margin and going into Salem. So, we don't need to worry about violating civil rights because they are not making stops on Gardner Street. Mr. DiPaolo, I cannot believe that there's 6 million cars down Gardner Street. It's just an incredible stat for a total residential street. 6 million vehicles, not just cars. Cars aren't the issue. Trucks are the issue. If you go up Pulaski Street, you're lucky if the truck gets in the left lane to go down Pulaski at the intersection of Gardner and Pulaski, and then do the regular truck route. Most of them just blow right through that intersection, hang a right on Gardner, and go all the way down to Margin. So there's a number of issues that we need to address. We need to deal with signage, Sergeant Hawkins. We need to deal with modern signage, not signage that's tucked over under a tree branch. We need to deal with lit signage that directs trucks to go in the left lane coming out of Andover Street, up on the initial entrance to Pulaski Street. Get them in the left lane and don't even let them think about going right. But the worst part is the other end. As Mr. Ferranti said, you don't know that it's even a truck route if you're not paying attention back by the dry cleaners that's quarter of a mile from the intersection of Gardner and Margin Street. You don't have a clue whether you should take a left or a right and you go left because that's normal traffic route. It says 114. GPS is telling me to go down 114. So we need to address the signage down on that end of Gardner and Margin. We haven't even talked about tour buses. There's 25 tour buses every morning that go in school buses from out of state, school buses from all over the state that are going down Gardner Street because that's the route GPS tells them to take. So there's a lot of work. I'd like to offer my services to the police department, and maybe Councilman Soulis can help us too, to really roll up our sleeves and dig in on the ordinance, the signage, the police presence. And Jim, I know you said that you're going to try to get them early. That's when the truck traffic goes. It's 6:30 to 8:30 every morning. I drive that road 10 times a day, and there's nothing going on at 10 o'clock, 10:30. Most of them, as you know, when you're delivering product for a living, as you can imagine, you're up and at it, and you're out, and you're not, at noontime, there's no truck traffic. But you get them in the morning at 6:30 to 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then again at the end of the day. But I'm rambling here. I'd really like to get a small working committee going with Captain Richards, Sergeant Hawkins, maybe Councilor Matsoulis, and myself, and maybe Mr. Ferranti or anybody else from the neighborhood that would like to meet and really get into this. We've talked about it for long enough, and we really need to start digging in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we could Mr. Chairman, if we could do that, maybe get a working group together, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate the suggestion, absolutely. Any other councilors? Councilman Soulis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was the councilor back 25 years ago when this issue was the same. And Tom DiPaolo and Steve Ferranti back then, there were many other neighbors, Jimmy Champany and the Mary Haight, and the list goes on and on. I can't remember their names. They're no longer here. The neighborhood has changed, but the issue is the same. This is 25 years later. I remember Tom DiPaolo's frustration over the Face-Boffin and Thorndike report that came in that specifically put signage out there to get the traffic off to get 114 from coming down to Gardner Street, and he brought that up again, and I do remember that, and that's something as a committee we will look into. I promise you, we will look into that. I left in '97 and I came back in 2014, so a lot of 2014. A lot of the issues I'm hearing now, I won't say they're new, they're the same issues. I left for 14 years, I came back, the issues are the same, which tells me that things really haven't changed, and I think we have to take a serious look at this. As Councilor Gould said, he pointed out the vehicles that have been going down there that shouldn't be going down there. I mean, I think that's pretty common knowledge to all of us. But with the frustration I feel coming out of the neighborhood, I think it's time that we do take a serious look at this. Not to say we haven't taken a serious look, we really have. But just for the information of the people here tonight, I have 4 or 5 motions tonight that are just on traffic. I mean, we're inundated with traffic. Every street in this city, I mean, I don't have to say it. I think we all know it. Just drive down the street, you try to get to your destination, it takes you forever. I could go back and probably tell you why and how we got here, but I mean, I'm not going to go back and tell you the history of the city of Peabody, but it's something that we're all going to have to face, and we're all going to have to work on this. And I feel the frustration because I get these calls every day, as most of you councilors do. And for the people on Gardner Street, I don't want you to think that we forgot this. We deal with this every day, you know, and we're working to work along with you to hopefully, I don't know if we could solve it, but to at least make life a little more bearable for you, you know, so. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Councilman Soulis. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be very brief. I think the words by the neighbors were very eloquent as to their concerns. I think all of us know that there is a major problem on that street. Certainly, I think all of us are aware that we need to make some changes to make things a little bit better. That's such a wonderful neighborhood, such a wonderful street. I think it probably hasn't helped. In some ways, we repaved a couple of years ago, and I'm sure that's probably increased speed a bit. But certainly the trucks are the major issue here. And Councilor Gould and Mitsoulas said things very well. I think a working committee is a great idea. My only suggestion was that we have maybe City Solicitor Adam Buckley on the committee, because I do think that the language needs to be tightened up to allow for our sergeant and our police officers to make sure that they have the tools and the language necessary to make sure that the enforcement is there. And if there's some holes or gaps in our language, I want to button that up and make sure that the police officers have what they need in order to move forward and pull over the trucks and make sure that the enforcement is in place. And I think all of us working together through a working committee can make that happen. So I just wanted to make that suggestion. I think the language needs to be tightened up. You know, but it's certainly a situation where we don't want to overthink this. There's trucks that shouldn't be on the street. Let's get the trucks off the road. Let's make sure the speeding is enforced. And but we just want to make sure that the language is in there for our protection and to make sure that we have what we need in order to make the enforcement stick. So, but just the police presence itself, I think, is very valuable. So I think I want to commend the council, commend the neighbors, and I think we can make some improvements here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Gould.
Mr. Chairman, as chair of the Municipal Safety, I'd love to invite you to maybe help us with that, if you would.
Absolutely, and I think I'm going to take the mayor's suggestion. We'll invite Assistant City Solicitor Buckley to sit on the committee. I think that would be.
So would you also come on the committee, please?
I will. Absolutely.
Would you chair that, please?
I will.
All right. So yourself, Solicitor Buckley, Councilor Mitsoulas, myself, Mr. Ferranti, and any other neighbor that would be willing to meet.
And Sergeant Harkins and Captain Richards.
Sergeant Harkins and Captain Richards, excuse me. And maybe we can get the crew of city councilors to, at some night, to go in and remove all the Salem signs up and down 114. I'll probably get in trouble for that. But.
Yes.
Hi, have a thought that might be able to use technology. Of course, it would require grants. What doesn't these days? But the technology exists to read plates. Every time we go through, we don't go through toolbox anymore, we go through and the plate is read. And if you don't have one of those little easy pass things, it sends you a bill in the mail. That same technology could be used on the street if you have a sensor that's up high enough that shorter vehicles won't trip it, but a high vehicle like a truck will. As the truck, at both ends of the street, as the truck goes down the street, it'll trip the sensor, take a picture of the plate, then when it goes to the other end of the street, it will also trip the sensor and take a picture of the plate, which then proves that it traversed the entire length of the street. It would relieve the police of having to have a detail there, and the folks that own the vehicle would get a lovely little bill in the mail from the city, and I think the word would get around really quickly, and probably the trucks would stop. Thank you. Thank you.
So I just had two comments before I close it. Councilor Gould, I echo your sentiments as far as you know, the Coca-Cola truck, the Cisco truck. And I will never tell the police how to do their job, but this is my opinion. If they write the ticket, we know that as far as violation of civil liberties, if the truck driver goes back to the boss and shows the ticket, they certainly can appeal it. We understand that. But they don't want to do that. It's going to, and we also know that as the truckers get tickets, they're going to tell other truckers, and that's what's going to happen. So I think as we do draft the ordinance and get the verbiage up there, I would like to encourage the police department, I think in your vein also, to write the ticket. If they want to fight it, fight it. But, you know, it costs money to take the trucker off the road and to stop the business. So I like to see them be a little bit more, step that up a little bit, and not worry so much about the civil rights, worry about the neighbors' rights. Go ahead.
I agree, Mr. Chairman, and you know, I just had a thought about Mr. Ferranti, and we're beating this to death here, but Mr. Ferranti talked about the police presence on Endicott Street. I'm petrified going up over Endicott Street in Danvers for that cop that sits right there at Dicon, and I go 25 miles an hour. Speeding's not the issue, though. It's truck traffic. It's really, I mean, there might be speeding, but it's truck traffic. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm waiting for you to pull a meeting together. Thank you.
Just a second thing I just want to finish my thought was the fact that we'll look at the signage, but I know that I have neighbors who, you know, they go to Bishop Fenwick, and quite frankly, what they do is they go down 128 to that Endicott Street exit because it's getting so congested in the morning. So I think that's one thing that we can look at. I think even, if I'm not mistaken, Salem, maybe Mass Highway, DOT, I believe as we get closer to Halloween, they actually encourage people not to take the 114 exit. They encourage them to go up an exit to alleviate the traffic. But to me, it sounds like it shouldn't be just a maybe 2-week issue. Maybe if we can get that issue, you know, year-round with proper signage and things of that nature. So those are my closing thoughts. So just for the neighbors, I just want to recap everything. So we're going to start a working committee. I will chair that. Mr. Ferrante is obviously invited if some of the neighbors would like to join. And we'll have Council Gould, Councilman Sulis, Assistant City Solicitor Buckley, Sergeant Hawkins, and Captain Richards. And we will work these issues through to get them where they need to be. Any other comments? Mr. Ferrante, you good? Okay, we're all set. Motion to close. So move. Apologize. So long. 8C. 8C, we're gonna skip 8C. Quite frankly, this is in my neighborhood. We have put up appropriate signage. I did reach out to the abutting neighbors. They're not interested in a flashing light. They'd like to. The signage that's gone up looks like it's going to hopefully alleviate the problem. But at this point, I'm going to table 8C, 8D. Move to refer to Municipal Safety Committee the possibility of a no left turn at the corner of Johnson Street and Lowell Street heading east, and request an opinion from the police department. So what we're talking about is the area that you folks are probably familiar with, the 7-Eleven across from the West Peabody fire station. An issue that we're having is there's a tremendous amount of traffic heading west in the morning, and heading east in the morning, and then at night everyone's heading west. And there was a request made about possibly looking at putting a no left-hand turn for people who are coming down Johnson Street heading towards the high school, and that they could not take a left-hand turn. They would actually have to go down Taylor Street if they wanted to head down West Peabody. And I did want to ask Sergeant Hawkins if he had a chance to, any opinion on that and your thoughts? Yeah. Excuse me, Sergeant Hawkins. I'm sorry. We were just 8D, which was the no left turn at Johnson Street and Lowell Street. I think you were involved in conversation. The only thing I want to put out there that's not in there is the thought was possibly doing it in the morning from 7 to 9 a.m. and in the evening from 4 to 6 p.m. That's when the traffic is extremely heavy at that corner. Just your thoughts, if you had a chance to look into this. I know you haven't had it that long. Just a motion was made about 2 weeks ago.
I did run an accident distribution study. However, I will tell you, it's one of those locations where when there's an accident, they usually pull up someplace else. So I don't know how accurate it is, because a lot of times they put in the address where the officer's responding to, not where it actually occurred. We've had since 2010, January 1st of 2010, so I did 8 years, we've had 14 accidents listed in that intersection. I would beg to say there's probably a handful more, maybe double that, where they've pulled into Engine 7 or the West Branch Libraries, things like that. I don't see an issue with doing that. I would actually recommend personally the whole day. I think the time constraints makes it very difficult to enforce. The officers get confused, especially if they're working an off shift. The motorists get confused on times, and most of our accidents are actually midday, lunchtime, and stuff like that. I don't see an issue with all day, but I will leave it up to the council to decide that.
Thank you for that recommendation. I was going to actually ask you just to, the data seems pretty strong, but if it was, I was going to just ask you from a kind of a common sense point of view, but the data backs it up, so I'm glad to hear that. I'm going to...
The data is based on the address.
I'm going to open up to other councils if they have any questions about the location or anything specific. Okay. There being none, what is the process to go about to make this change? I haven't had this before me before, so how would we go about doing this?
Don't ask me a question I don't know the answer to. I don't know if that would require an ordinance or not. I believe it would, and I do not believe we need to go through DOT for that.
I'm being advised by the city clerk it would be a regular ordinance. So we'll make that recommendation when we put out a committee. Thank you very much. Last item, item E. Motion made by Councilor Manning Martin with Councilor McGinn. Move to refer to the Municipal Safety Committee a resident complaint about access for emergency vehicles being obstructed on Shaw's Lane, Holton Street, and Fountain Street. Councilor Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The board had received a couple of emails and complaints from a resident, so I referred this to Municipal Safety to ensure that the residents' concerns were addressed, and in the interim, Mayor Betancourt had referred communication to me that they had been working on that subject. So he's actually engaged in conversation right now, but I'd like to defer to Mayor Betancourt if he'd like to address that subject, because he has been doing a lot of work with the police on this subject matter. So he did refer the information to me, so I'd rather defer to him since he is here to address that matter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You, Mayor Betancourt.
Great, thank you, Councilor Manning Martin. And yes, this was brought to our attention by a neighbor a couple of months ago. It was a concern that I think was important for us to look at and made us evaluate that whole neighborhood, which, as many of you know, I think all of you know, very tight neighborhood, very tight roads, some one-ways. And I think we needed to kind of look at a global perspective as to try to how to make this work. So over the last couple of months, we've had our Fire Chief Steve Pasden and his team, our Chief Griffin, our Police Department, Sergeant Harkins, our Building Inspector, our DPW Director, our City Solicitor, and myself. I've been there a number of times with Councilor Peter McGinn to kind of look and try to come up with a solution. We believe that we've come up with a proper solution that could meet the needs of the neighborhood. My biggest concern was that it was going to become a Holton Street versus Shaw's Lane kind of battle over parking, and certainly that's the last thing we wanted to create, was a war between streets over parking. I know the gentleman is here today who lives on Holton Street, right at that corner. He's expressed to me his desire to work with the city as well to make sure that all vehicles have the turning radiuses and the ability to get down those streets, because certainly we need to make sure that all of our emergency vehicles can access those streets to get to those neighbors that may need assistance. So Chief Pasden is here along with our Community Development Director, with Sergeant Harkins. We kind of have a preliminary plan in place. There needs to be an ordinance presented to you to have the final official vote. But as a temporary measure, what we did is we put no parking signs on Shaw's Lane and areas of Fountain Street, just to make sure that the emergency vehicles had the access they need, and to develop the long-range plan. What we'd like to do and what we are proposing is to put some no parking signs on Holton Street at the corner of Shaw's Lane, a certain distance from the turn or the curve, to allow for the vehicles to access the road, and to allow on Shaw's Lane parking on one side but not on both sides. So we'd be putting forth an ordinance that would not allow parking on Shaw's Lane on one side of the road. I think Chief Pasden has a recommendation as to that. In speaking to the neighbors on Holton Street in particular, Mr. Stasnos, who is here, lives at that corner, he is all for that, and is certainly in agreement with making sure that we put signs up, no parking to corner signs, that again would just make sure we allow for sufficient turning radius for those emergency vehicles. So this has been a work in progress. It was not an easy solution, and we just wanted to take our time, make sure it was done properly. We think this works for everybody, meets the needs, the parking needs of the neighborhood, as well as, most importantly, the needs of the access vehicles to get down the streets, those tight streets, to make sure that we get to those people that need emergency services. So I certainly think Chief Pasden is prepared to speak to that, to give a little bit more perspective and kind of a little bit more of a breakdown of what would be coming forward to you as a change in ordinance.
Thank you. Chief Pasden.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. This has been a topic that I've been looking at, for a number of years, even prior to being named fire chief. In that area, in fact, when we purchased the ladder truck, the tower ladder that we bought in 2011, we actually used the Fountain Street, Shaw's Lane area we had to actually minimize the size of the ladder. We really wanted to get a 102-foot ladder. But when we took a look at we took the steering radius, all the diagrams we got from the engineering department of the manufacturer, and we realized we had to downscale that to make the wheelbase smaller to be able to make that turning radius. So we used that street, as a sample. Now, if you're interested, I have a number of maps, colored maps that the Community Development Department did, so you can actually take a look at, what we're dealing with from an aerial view. And my biggest concern is not just access on Shaw's Lane, but getting onto Shaw's Lane and getting out of Shaw's Lane. And what we're proposing, and I was talking with Sergeant Hawkins, that's actually his ordinance in the police departments. I think if I'm correct, on the Fountain Street side, we're looking about a 25-foot no parking zone on easterly side of Fountain Street. Is that correct?
It would run from trying to remember the directions, from the southerly border of number 4, the property known as number 4, to the northerly border of the property known as number 6. That would give you from driveway to driveway, which, according to Lieutenant Lewis, would give you more than enough room.
Yeah.
And then something very similar, I don't remember the exact numbers, on Holton Street.
On the Holton Street side, there's no parking on one side. But when we come out of Shaw's Lane, again, with that same aerial truck as an example, we have to swing onto Holton Street to be able to, exit. And so when the cars are parked across the street on Holton Street, we're unable to get out that way as well. So that's the dilemma that we're facing, and we also feel as though, at least for the time being, originally there was a thought of no parking at all on Shaw's Lane, but in conference with the mayor and everybody else involved in the police department, we'd like to see no parking on one side. We really haven't determined which is the best side. We're actually going to revisit that and go up and really take a look at, get a truck up there, and what would be the best side for pump panels and fire operations to have no parking on which side of the street. So we haven't come up with a determination of that yet. But again, my biggest concern is the steering ability, the radius for the trucks, to have those areas cleared of parking. Because I was up there a number of times over the past few weeks, and it's very clear there's just even during the day, there's a number of cars, and I'm assuming at nighttime, and I'm probably going to take a ride there when I leave. There are probably even more once everybody's home. So that's really what we need. We need that steering radius to get those trucks up there. So that's the biggest problem, I think, for the fire side that we're facing.
Thank you, Chief Pasden.
Thank you.
Council McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And although I'm not a member of this committee, I appreciate you letting me speak, as this is in our Ward 2. I think that it's evident that there's been a great deal of effort put forward here, and there are temporary measures in place. So, you know, that addresses the emergency access for the, you know, at the present moment. I would like to suggest that there's really no further action for the council to take until we have the formal recommendations from the police and fire department. So if a member of the committee would make a motion that concerning the matter of emergency access to Shaw's Lane, that the fire and police department put their recommended ordinance changes in writing and a communication to the city council, if somebody would make that motion, that would give us something to act on to put the permanent fix in place going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Council Manning.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the fire chief, the mayor, and the police for their teamwork on this. And I referred it to committee because we had gotten multiple requests from a resident, and so it was more of probably a communication issue, because clearly there's been a lot of work that's been going on this, and everyone in the city, certainly the fire and police and the mayor, would be concerned about emergency vehicle access to every resident. So I'm not surprised that you have all been working on it collectively for some time. So I appreciate you all coming out here tonight and briefing us on all the work that you have been doing, and I'm sure you will come up with a solution to put forward towards the council in the form of an ordinance that addresses those concerns. So I thank you for your time tonight and all the time that you've all put into it, and I will make that in the form of a motion that when they complete their ordinance, they put it forward to the council for review and vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Before I just wanted to go to Council Melville for a second before we have any discussion of the motion. And his hand up, Council Melville.
Yeah, just one question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To either Sergeant Harkins or the chief. It's just when there's currently a temporary no parking on signs up there right now. I went and actually went down there and spoke to that was like, you know, the one major question coming out of this. I think they were very comfortable with where the direction this was going. When do we see those, the choice between one side or the other? Is that going to require the council's approval, or are those going to stay up until essentially what I'm asking, are you going to just choose one side once you figure out which is the best? Do we have the no parking temporary signs up on?
Currently, they're up for the entire street. I actually just spoke to the mayor about that to see what his wishes were. We're going to leave them up for the entire street until we determine which side is best, which should come in the next, by hopefully the beginning of next week. We'll sit down and discuss that. At that point, once the decision is made, even though the ordinance hasn't been passed, we'll take down the other side and then just monitor the side that we decided was best. And I think that'll have to do with the access for the fire equipment. Will help us make that decision.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm in full support of the motion on the floor.
Thank you. So you heard the motion on the floor by Council Manning Martin. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, vote. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. And motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. I'm going to chair from over here so we can just move things right along. We're running a little late tonight, so this should be a very brief meeting of the Human Services Committee meeting. Members present, myself as chair, Councilor Melville, Councilor Mitsoulas, Councilor O'Neill, and Councilor Rossignol. And on the agenda this evening, we have an update on the sale of the Crowninshield apartments, and Curt Bellavance, the Director of Community Development, is here this evening, and we invited him up to just give us a brief update on that. And of course, the mayor is here as well if he'd like to join in. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And I wanted to speak. Curt is, Director Bellavance is here as well, and he has some information to provide. But this was an extremely gratifying moment for me personally, a very gratifying moment, I think, for us as a city, all of the elected officials, that we were able to make this deal happen and protect the residents. Just to go back a step so everybody is familiar about where we stand, the Crowninshield property, the Tannery Apartments, their 40-year affordable housing restriction expired this year, which allowed the owner to potentially sell the property. Under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40T, if they put the property out for sale, they could go for market rate housing, at which time, once an offer was accepted, the state designee, the state designated developer would then have the ability or the opportunity to match that market sale. If they were able to match that market sale, then they would be able to keep those units affordable. As all of you know, because I'm sure you've heard from many residents, we have a number of residents that are at the tannery under the affordable housing, and we needed to do our very best to keep that affordable for our residents. Also, it was extremely important to keep those as towards our affordable housing number. As all of you know, we required to have 10% of the city's housing inventory be affordable. We are at approximately 9.4%, about 150 or so units shy. If we lost those 300 plus units, we would have dropped from 9.4% to approximately 8%, been behind about 450 or so units, and that would have potentially caused some issues for us in the very near future. As all of you know, because we're not at our 10%, potential development, potential 40B development could come into the city, bypass and skirt our zoning, and potentially some development could happen that might not fit in with what we would want for our neighborhoods and certainly in parts of the city. So this was important for a number of reasons. I want to thank the City Council, you, Council Manning Martin. I want to state and recognize the great work that was done by city and state officials. We had a number of meetings in my office, a number of teleconferences. At those meetings were our Director of Community Development, Curt Bellavance, Pete McGinn, our Ward 2 Councilor, our State Senator, Joan Lovely, our State Representative, Tom Walsh. We had multiple representatives from the Mass Housing with the Director, Crystal Cornegay. We had representatives from DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development. The Undersecretary, Janelle Chan, was at those meetings, and we really worked hard to reach a way for this to happen, cobble some money together to allow the state-designated developer wind companies to purchase that property at $37.5 million. Just to give you some perspective, we have that property assessed at $14 million. So certainly it was pretty amazing that it went for $37.5. But when it did get to $37.5, it triggered a 30-day window for the designated developer, wind companies, city and state officials to try to reach that target. I had some moments of real fear. I had some moments of lost hope during the course of this process if we were going to be able to reach those numbers. Wind company certainly stepped up, added to their number. The state, DHCD, Mass Housing, stepped up to add to their number. And then during the course of the meetings, I made a commitment of $1.6 million from the city of Peabody. Those funds would come from community preservation, in which we have a large amount in our affordable housing account, and also from our inclusionary zoning account. Inclusionary zoning, that is money that has been put into an account that was for some earlier years ago, some buyout deals for new developments, specifically the Dearborn property in Brooksby Village, where they were, instead of doing affordable units at those locations, the city at the time made the decision to allow for buyouts, to buy out of the affordable housing requirement. That money was put in part to the inclusionary housing account, and we were able to take advantage of those two numbers that I believe we can move forward with the $1.6 million. I will be coming forward to you with those requests. I need votes from the Community Preservation Commission and then from the City Council to free up those funds to contribute to the $37.5 million. But I felt strongly that this was an investment that we as a community needed to make to protect our residents that live in the tannery apartments, to make sure that their quality of life is not impacted. The humanitarian work that all of us did was extremely important and very well received by those neighbors. I can't tell you the number of calls and letters and emails that I've gotten from neighbors at the tannery, thanking the city for what we were able to do. I think we all stepped up, and it was one of those gratifying moments of being in as an elected official where we can really, we really made something, I think, very good happen. That was, again, number one priority, the humanitarian work to protect those residents that we hold so dear here in the city, but also it was important to make sure that those affordable units counted towards our number. So there's still a little bit of work ahead of us. The closing, now that the $37.5 million was reached, they have 210 days in which to close. So there's a long due diligence period. So we're anticipating that sometime in the spring, hopefully this will close, and then it will be another 40 years that that affordable housing restriction will be put in place. So still work ahead of us. I will be coming forward again to get the votes from community preservation from the City Council. Certainly I'll be asking for all of your support for that. But again, I want to thank all of you. This was really one of those moments where city and state came together collectively and really did something that I think we all should be very proud of. So I just wanted to thank all of you for that work.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And members of the subcommittee, do you have any questions for the mayor or Mr. Bellavance? Councillor McGinn?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Actually, Councillor McGinn, if you can. Members of the committee, I saw no. Any hands? No? Okay, Councillor McGinn.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. You just pointed out I'm not on the committee, but I appreciate you allowing me to comment. Yeah, I think the mayor summed it up very well. I just very briefly want to thank him for his effort on this. He rallied the coordinated effort to make this happen. His leadership on this, he made it a priority. You know, as he indicated, we were under a very tight clock there on a 30-day window to get some action, and it came pretty close to the deadline before all parties were in agreement. So the mayor rattled off a number of people that contributed to the effort, but it would not have been possible without his direct involvement, and I thank him very much for making that effort and making it a priority. Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. I just have a question on, Mayor, did you say 150 or did you say 115 units shy of 10%?
In the neighborhood of 150, 150.
Thank you. And regarding the 1.6 million CPA that we have in affordable, earmarked for affordable housing, or that we can earmark to affordable housing, I don't believe, some communities do, but our CPA ordinance, or we don't have any restriction on there that we can't give it to private agencies, do we? I don't think we do, but maybe that's because I know we have been giving it to, say, the Historical Society, which is private. Because maybe Curt, is Curt here? Maybe he would know that. I don't think we have that restriction. Some communities do, but I don't think we do. I just wanted to make sure.
I'm not aware of the restriction. I know with this project, it would probably be a subsidy through DHCD, which would be allowable. So.
Excellent, excellent. I was just concerned about that because I know some communities do, so I didn't want us to kind of find that out after the fact. So, excellent, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, and everyone involved. I think the mayor gave a spectacular summary from soup to nuts of what went into this, and great work all around. And I think the mayor put it very well. It was a collective effort of state and local officials just working together to do the right thing. So good job, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Yes, Councilor Gould.
I'm not a member of the committee either, but I just want to thank yourself as chair to keeping this in the spotlight. But Mr. Mayor, it was incredible the way it all came about, and you definitely, not you, we affected lives. There are people that have reached out to me and thanking the council and the mayor for saving people from having to make those tough decisions. it affects their living conditions in the long run. So thank you for really keeping it focused and going right at it. So thank you.
Any other, thank you, Tom. Any other comments from committee members? And I think it was important that we did meet so many times over the year, and I thank Mr. Bellavance as well for making himself available throughout the year, because by having these open meetings and having the discussion and bringing folks along, I think it alleviated a lot of their angst that they weren't forgotten, that we were working on it and making progress. So to those folks, thank you at home that were affected by this and being patient with us, and it appears it's all worked out very well. So with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Thank you very much.
I'd like to bring to order the regular meeting of the Peabody City Council held on Thursday evening, October 25th at 7:30 at Frank L. Wigan Auditorium, City Hall. We'll start tonight with the moment of silence and a pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move approval of the record, Mr. President.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Under the suspension of rules, I'd like to move to, without any objections, 7A. 7A with the mayor. This is... Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good evening, Council. I'm very happy to be here today for an appointment. As all of you know, we had the retirement of Tim Healy, which was pretty difficult news to receive because I thought he just did an outstanding job for the city of Peabody. He was our first facilities director. Really molded the department, worked through some difficult issues in the transition to the creation of its own department. But he did an excellent job for us for almost 4 years and retired over the course of the summer. He's still been around to help us on a couple of things, certainly by phone, and I think he'll always be willing to help us in any capacity. We posted the position. We received, and I believe it was between 15 and 20 candidates for the position of facilities director, and it was an outstanding crop of candidates that we received. We did an initial round of interviews, and I wanted to thank the committee, our HR director, Beth O'Donnell, our building inspector, Al Talarico, John Olympio from the school committee, and our school business manager, Tom LaFleur. Had interviews, narrowed the candidates down, and then I met with the candidates, as well as Bob Labossiere, our DPW director, and Mike Gingras, our finance director. And I'm putting forward today a candidate that I thought was outstanding and really fit the criteria that I was looking for this position. You have his resume. For 8 years, he was the facilities director for the city of Gloucester, and he was actually the first facilities director for the city of Gloucester. And with the combined responsibility of both city and school buildings, 1.3 million square feet, and oversaw 40 employees, which is similar to what the city of Peabody, we have a little bit more under the direction, but very close. And as you know, Gloucester is a large city that has many different projects going on. Another thing that appealed to me greatly was that he had experience with the MSBA and a number of projects in the city of Gloucester. I thought that municipal experience was extremely important for this position because of the fact that I do think operations of a municipality are certainly different than the requirements in private practice and in private business. Mr. Hafey has experience in a municipality, but also with the Department of Conservation and Recreation, the DCR. At the time, it was formerly the DEM, but he also has state experience, worked on a number of state projects, and then also, as you see, he worked for private company Thermal Barriers for a number of years. He left the city of Gloucester earlier this year voluntarily to do some consulting and work on his own business. and in property management, and he can certainly speak to that, but some additional experience that I thought was very valuable, because a lot of this job is property management, making sure our facilities are up to code and in the best working condition that we can have them for our city employees and for the public. It's certainly a very challenging position. You know of all the city buildings that we have here, the 10 schools, the 5 fire stations, the 3 libraries, the city hall, the DPW building, our golf course, Brooksby Farm, and as well as some other properties that we've purchased over the years. So it's certainly a difficult position, some position that I thought required an excellent background, and I'm very happy that we were able to have Mr. Hafey show interest and able to have him for the position. Here today, as well as Mr. Hafey, certainly to answer any questions, but it's my privilege and pleasure to ask for the appointment of Jim Hafey as our city's facilities director. Thank you.
Mr. Hafey, like to come up and say a few words?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. President, councilors. Just for the record, my name is Jim Hafey. I live at 9 Andrew Street in Gloucester. I want to thank the mayor for conducting a really nice interview session. It was very welcoming here in Peabody. It's quite a refreshing thing. I look forward to this position. I've done a little bit of background research in here, and there are some challenges, and that's what I like. I like fixing things. I like working on these buildings, especially the historic ones. I just really enjoyed it. It's what I've done my whole life. It's my passion. I think you've all had a chance to maybe look at my resume, and I open it up for any questions that you have for me specifically.
Councilors? Councilor Gould.
Welcome aboard, Mr. Hafey.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. What do you think your biggest challenge is going to be?
You know, in the past, the biggest challenge for me hasn't been the building so much as it has been managing the personnel. That seems to take up a lot of time, and it can offer quite a bit of a different set of skills than it does managing buildings anyways. But I think that's my biggest challenge right now.
Councilor Gould,
it's going to take a while to get to know these people, of course. Yeah.
Motion to receive.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to receive 7A. So moved.
Thank you. Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's vote. Sorry, Councilor Gould. Anything else? Any other councilors? Councilor Gravel.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you. By
Thank
the way.
you.
Your paper was impressive, but you're as impressive.
Thank you.
In terms of the mayor's praise of the interview process and what you've been through. When our previous facilities director took the job, which we created because there was a desire and a need for having somebody to provide oversight to the facilities, he was requested kind of up front and said it would take some time to get to give us sort of a inventory or an assessment on a priority basis of the needs and the drives of the facilities so that we can know what's coming down the road and how things are being addressed and, you know, what the emphasis has to be, you know.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of buildings in the portfolio, you know, between the schools, the city-owned buildings, et cetera. Unfortunately, we never really got that, but we got it in pieces. And I was wondering, would it be, you know, as the new director coming in, and I know it's, you know, anytime that somebody takes on a new job, you kind of got to get to know the lay of the land anyway. Would that be something that you would be able to provide the council, sort of an insight of the state of the buildings, so that we know, you know, where emphasis has to be put and what to expect coming down the road?
That's one of my top priorities. In fact, during the interview process, I think that was my first question, was, is there an inventory? Is there any sort of a overall assessment or 5 or 10 year plan for these buildings that I can fall back on to see what's been done, what needs to be done based on that? I didn't see any, or they didn't seem to know of any. I'm still going to do a little poking around to see what might be out there. But yes, to answer your question, that's certainly a priority, to put up a comprehensive plan about all the buildings.
I just know as one counselor, I'd be grateful to have that. It's, because there's a lot there, and until you really get to know everything, and I'm not looking for engineering studies or, cost appraisals or any of that stuff. I'm kind of, from the 10,000-foot view, here's what we own, this is what we have, these are the issues that we're facing now and in the future, and, here's the priority of those.
Absolutely agreed. It's important to understand what the functional life is of the components of these buildings and where we are, as a snapshot and where we're going with these. Just to have a look ahead and understand when replacements are going to be warranted, for a budget reason primarily. But it's good to stay ahead of them. Preventative maintenance is key, certainly. Thank you.
Councilor Melville.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I just had one. You had mentioned you did some work with the MSBA. How can you kind of just summarize that experience? Was it more rehab or rehabbing buildings, or was it new buildings? I mean, this is something that I think down the road we're going to see as a challenge for the city, especially.
I did 3 MSBA projects with the city of Gloucester. The first one was I roofed 6 roofs, 5 schools. One school had 2 roofs. That was the first one. That was back in 2011. The second one was the new West Paris Elementary School. That was a $39.4 million school. I was the contract manager on that one. And that, of course, was a 2.5-3 year project from start to finish on that. And we just finished that up 2 years ago. At the end of that one, we started up another roofing project at the high school. It ended up being about $3.5 million when we started replacing rooftop units and things like that. And that was my baby, start to finish. We didn't do that roof with the other roofs 5 years previous because the high school didn't qualify. It hadn't reached that 20-year mark. Even though it was in the worst condition, MSBA won't reimburse a roof unless it's 20 years old.
Thank you.
Thank you. First, let me say, welcome. It's good to have you aboard. I did want to extend a courtesy prior to your hiring. We had set up a public services subcommittee meeting, and one of the items or the topics that will be discussed would be the separation of duties as far as the facilities director in the DPW with snow removal as it pertains to the school buildings, or it might be good for you to be there. I think I invited your assistant manager, Dave Gamache, instead. Mm-hmm. But if you'd like to be there, I think it's scheduled for November 8th, Tim, if I'm not mistaken. And we can have the clerk send you an invitation. Obviously, no pressure. I know you're learning, but you are more than welcome to hear that out if you'd like.
Thank you. Actually, the DPW director and I discussed that already during one of the interviews. Who's responsible for what? It's going to come up quick, so it's better to get it ironed out soon.
Yeah, if you want to leave us all your cell phone number, that would be great.
No.
I thought that was a requirement, so. Councilor Rosano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Mr. Hafey, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to our city. There's going to be a lot to undertake between the 10 schools that we have, City Hall, 4 fire departments, police station. There's a lot of work to undertake as far as our municipal buildings go. And along the same lines as Councilor Gravel had mentioned, the former director, that's one of the things that we wanted as a priority, was just to get an infrastructure assessment of what we have for our buildings and a timeline of when his idea was we needed to kind of really look at things and prioritize. So welcome, and I appreciate you, and I look forward to working with you. But I think that is definitely something that I, as one of the councilors, would really look forward to your feedback as far as our assessment goes to our buildings.
Okay. So thank you. I look forward to it also.
So Manny Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Hafey. Your resume is very impressive, and you come from a city, much like Peabody, rich with history, old infrastructure, old buildings.
Yes.
Same size, roughly, and you certainly present yourself as somebody that can get along well with people. So I'm sure you will hit the ground running with your expertise and that you're affable with staff. I think you seem like you'd probably be a good fit. My only question is, you live in Gloucester, you worked in Gloucester for several years, and you were the first facilities director hired in Gloucester, and I guess you were in that position for 7 or 8 years. I'm just wondering, under what circumstances did you leave?
I was presented with a number of opportunities. I have a small business. I do a lot in real estate. There was a confluence of things that happened last January that it just worked out that way, that I thought it was my best move there at that time to go back out on my own and take advantage of these things.
So did you retire from Gloucester?
I did not. I resigned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilors McGinn? Anyone? You're looking like you had something
Yeah,
to say.
if no other councilors have comments, I'd go ahead with a motion.
Is there any other councilors? Before the motion, I'd just like to say it. Jim, I was on the committee the last time that was selecting the director, and I was very impressed of the resumes that came in and meeting majority of the people too. And the former director did, in my opinion, did a fantastic job. He was always there when you needed him. I welcome you to do the same. I'm sure that if there was 15, 20 resumes, and you were the cream of the crop, I think we'll probably get in good hands. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would add my welcome as well, Mr. Hafey. And with that, I would move to approve the appointment of James M. Hafey, 9 Andrews Street, Gloucester, Mass., to the position of Facility Directors for a 1-year term to expire December 31st, 2019. So moved.
Councilors, you heard the motion. Roll call.
Councilors O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gould.
Yes.
Sasla.
Yes.
Mitsoulas.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Melville. Gravel.
Yes.
Charist.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Welcome.
Thank you, Council. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Councilors, I just, again, forgot to say the open meeting law statement. This meeting is being televised live by cable channel 9 and being taped by Peabody Access TV and also being recorded by our city council stenographer. Thank you. Going back to the original order, go to hearings 4A. Would the clerk please read the notice?
We need to continue to go to Councilor Sasla.
Continue to go to Councilor Sasla.
Yes, under suspension rules, motion to receive item 8C.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
And the petitioner has asked to put off the hearing until December 13, 2018. So move.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Move to reports of committees. Drug and Education Awareness, Councilor Manning Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Drug Education and Awareness Committee did meet on October 18th. Joining us was Sharon Cameron, the Director of Public Health, Todd Buckley of the Colton Buckley Foundation, and members Councilor Turco and Councilor Rozignol, with myself as chair, and I believe a majority of council members were in attendance as well. And we met to award some grant money, some money that we had raised throughout the year through fundraising efforts, and we focused on families of those suffering from addiction. So we had voted to allocate a number of funds to various committees with that in mind. We took a motion to award $1,000 to the Colton Buckley Foundation, and that motion passed 3-0. I'll put that forward to the full committee in the form of a motion.
You heard the motion. Roll call. Roll call.
Councilors O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gould.
Yes.
Sasla. He's not here. Mitsoulas.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Melville's not here. Gravel.
Yes.
Charist.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0, 2 absent.
Thank you. We also made a motion to donate $1,000 to the YMCA Family in Recovery Program, which is a new program that started this year, very recently, and that is going very well. So I will put that motion forward to the full committee.
You heard the motion. Roll call, please.
Councilors O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gould. Mitsoulas. Manning Martin.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Gravel.
Yes.
Charist.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0, 2 absent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We also made a motion to donate $1,500 to the Citizens in Transition Family Sober Living, which is located in Peabody and focuses on helping families reunite to live a sober lifestyle. I'll put that forward in the form of a motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You heard the motion. Roll call.
Councilors O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gould.
Yes.
Mitsoulas. Manning Martin.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Gravel.
Yes.
Charis.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0, 1 absent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also, the Colton Buckley Foundation will be having its 5K race, its annual race, this November 11th. And they're doing a little something different this year. They're going to have the Friday night, the evening before, they're going to have a pasta supper. And we had all met, and Director Sharon Cameron had been looking for a venue to begin Narcan training. So Lisa Buckley offered the pasta dinner evening as a venue to do that. So we thought that that was going to be a very nice fit. And what the subcommittee voted to do was to donate $1,500 to Public Health Department of Peabody in order to purchase Narcan units. So the individuals that attend this training at the free pasta dinner at the Colton Buckley race the night before will be able to leave with, if they wish to, units of Narcan to take with them to take home after the training. So again, the subcommittee voted to donate $1,500 to Peabody's Public Health Department for that purpose of purchasing Narcan. I put that motion forward to you. So moved.
You heard the motion. Roll call.
Councilors O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gould. Sasla.
Yes.
Mitsoulas.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Gravel.
Yes.
Charis.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the Director of Public Health, Sharon Cameron, wishes to and plans to present other Narcan trainings throughout the year. This will be the first one. I believe she hopes to offer one at City Hall and also at the YMCA later in the year. So she is still planning that. And also, I just wanted to thank all the businesses and the residents and the participants and all the volunteers that assisted with the long drive competition that we had this year over the summer, dedicated to Dan Pimenta, our firefighter, because that's where these funds came from. So without everyone's generosity, we wouldn't have been able to award so much money to so many good causes to help the families in Peabody that are suffering from the opioid epidemic and addiction. So that is a report of committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Gravel on charter review, please.
Thank you, Council President. Also, on the evening of the 18th, the ad hoc committee on charter review met. Sitting on behalf of the committee were myself as chair, Council McGinn, and Council Manning Martin. All members of the City Council were present. At that time, we were discussing, since the mayor had engaged the Collins Group to put forth the new charter committee for review. Under that, in their recommendations really were, it called for a 7-person committee, 4 to be selected by the mayor and 3 to be selected by the City Council. So the first motion of the evening was to accept the recommendation from the Collins Group for a 7-member committee for the Charter Review Committee, of which 4 people will be appointed by the mayor and 3 people will be appointed by the City Council. That motion carried 3-0. So moved.
Need to vote on the motion? All, you heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Next, we were fortunate that we had 8 very qualified candidates send us applications, resumes, letters, etc. A motion was made to accept the following candidates for the Charter Review Committee and to place their name into nomination for selection by the City Council as a whole. Elfie Wilkins, Christopher Gilbert, Keith Doucette, Rob Mareschi, Stephanie Peach, Peter Bacala, Sudie Smaller, Mike Schultz. That motion carried 3-0. So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Next, the idea was presented that it would be good, since the people took the time and they expressed the interest and showed the good faith to send us their request to be considered, that we give them the opportunity at our regular meeting on November 8th, 2018, to do a 3 to 5 minute presentation, basically, helping us understand why they wanted to be on the committee and, what they bring to the process. So a motion was made to request the city clerk to invite those members, those nominees, and that motion carried 3-0.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's Councilor Rosenau.
Just a question and a clarification. Will the council be getting the mayor's nominees to match them up against the 8 contestants or participants that we have to see if their strengths and are compatible?
That was a separate motion that was made that evening, so. I'm sorry. That was a separate motion. We'll read it out.
On the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Then there was a request that the mayor submit to the City Council by Thursday, November 8th, his list of candidates for the Charter Review Commission for our review, and the City Council will submit their applicants for his review, and kind of as a way of sharing information. So I know once the mayor will get this motion, it'll be his opportunity to send us who he's considering. But again, we have no part in his selection, but it would be nice to know that we're getting a well-rounded group. So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's the vote.
And then there was a little bit of a discussion of the voting process, and Council Manning Martin brought up a suggestion that the Committee of the Whole, that we create a paper ballot with all names that are in nomination, and after their presentations at the end of that period of time, on the same evening, that we would use the paper ballots, which will be public and transparent, councils will sign the ballots. And they select 3 candidates that they would like to appoint, that those ballots would then be submitted to the city clerk. The city clerk at that meeting will take the tally, and the top 3 vote getters will be the ones that are selected, again, in an effort to make sure that it's fully transparent and the results would be reviewable. That motion was made and carried on a 3-0 vote. So moved.
On that motion, just to be clear, would the selection be announced that night?
It was our intent, and I think the discussion that evening was to make sure that we make the selection that night and announce that night so that we can move forward.
Thank you. On the motion, Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the motion, I was thinking after the meeting, you know, what if we have a tie? So I was wondering if it might make sense to just amend the motion to that there would be a second ballot cast to break any tie. Tim, what else can go wrong with elections? I was just
Well, I
trying
had
to
that
troubleshoot.
same thought at the last meeting if there was a tie between the 3rd and 4th place candidate. How would the committee handle that? So it's probably best to rectify that now before we get into it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to a second ballot and a third if required to break a tie.
Councilor Rosenau.
Just for clarification, the second ballot would then only include the 2 tied members, or would it include the remainder?
I would recommend that it include the 2 tied members only, because otherwise you open the whole thing up again.
Yep. I just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
Right, and I agree with that. I just think it's the right idea to figure this out now and not try to do it by the seat of our pants there, well, if we're presented with that scenario. So that makes sense to me. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Gravel, would you read that into the motion again?
Yeah, so in the event that there's a tie, add it to the motion. In the event that there's a tie, we would have a second ballot with the 2 tied, with those candidates that are tied, and another ballot would be cast, and this time it would be for only 1. And so moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Is a vote?
The last item was a request to have the city council president have this included on the regular agenda, so it's not a part of a subcommittee, so it's a committee of the whole.
Agreed. Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
No further comments.
Industrial Community Development, Councilor Gould.
Sorry, having a discussion here offline. Tonight we had a very informative and, in my opinion, a concrete meeting which was initiated by a motion made by Councilor Turco, who has not let this stay dormant. He's very focused on fixing this problem, which is the rodent issue and as it relates to trash. So we heard from Sharon Cameron, who gave us very detailed plan on changing our ordinance and, recommendations that should go into changing our ordinance. And we decided to have a working group made up of various department heads. Sharon will chair it, representative of the mayor's office, Department of Public Services, Building Inspector's Office, and a member of the council. And we're very much looking forward to getting this going and actually making some change. And we hope, Councilor Turco asked me when I thought we could have something that we could present to the council, and I'm hoping, Sharon is also hoping it's early 2019, maybe 2 or 3 months into 19. So we'll get back to, it's in committee, and we'll keep this council posted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Sasslaw on Municipal safety, please.
Thank you, Council President. We had a full agenda tonight. The first item on the agenda was a request by Truman and Elias Realty Group regarding North Central Street. This is they are redeveloping the Domino's building at Wilson Square. We did get a late communication requesting that some time be extended because of the study being done on the corridor study on Wilson Square down at Central Street, I believe it was. So Attorney Kelty was here. He agreed to that extension, and so he'll be looking at that and working with the local ward councilors to move that proposal forward regarding the requests of street requests on Pulaski Street and Pound Street in that area. The second item on the agenda was a request to receive from resident Steve Ferrante from 13 Gardner Street, requesting help for police presence on Gardner Street. As many of you know, Gardner Street is a residential street. We heard from the neighbors, 4 neighbors who are been longtime neighbors who are extremely concerned, you might even say upset, as far as the amount of truck traffic that is going through that neighborhood, which should not be going through that neighborhood. They expressed their personal stories, and they gave the committee a background over the years. Then we heard from Sergeant Harkins, who addressed some of their concerns, and also Council Gould weighed in with some of the history. Actually, it was good that the mayor was here also. I think the residents came away knowing that we're very concerned, and to that point, a motion was made to put together a working committee. That working committee will be comprised of, it's going to be chaired by Council Gould, who was nice enough to head up the committee. Council Gould lives and has a business in the area, so he's extremely familiar with it. Also on the committee will be Councilman Mitsoulas, myself, Steve Ferrante. We've also made an offer to any other neighbors in the area who'd like to be on it. Sergeant Hawkins, Captain Richards, and City Solicitor Buckley. And the 4 items that we're going to concentrate on that committee, or the 5 items, is correct language for the ordinance so that the trucks that should not be in the area, so there was a little bit of a, let's just say, a loophole in the ordinance that Sergeant Harkins wasn't quite comfortable with, so they're going to try and tighten up that language. The second item is modern lit signage, so that people from both directions are aware not to be on that roadway if they're a trucker. Also, increased police presence and enforcement. And then there was some discussion of possibly bringing some technology regarding some license plate pictures. And lastly, it was brought up that Route 128 can also be possibly used to direct some of the traffic off of Gardner Street. Right now, all the traffic is directed onto Route 114 through Gardner Street, and we're going to look at Route 128, which actually is used during the Halloween period for Salem. They do direct traffic to go up past the 114 exit to the Endicott Street exit. So that'll be a working committee to address the neighbors' concerns. Next up on the agenda was a request regarding a flashing light in Connors and Goodale and Connors Road. I made that motion. We're going to table that motion for now. It looks like we're going to be able to resolve the issue with some signage that was put up recently. Next up was a motion made by myself regarding no left turn at the corner of Johnson Street and Lowell Street. The opinion from the police department was they are in favor. The accident data shows that it is a dangerous area, and I'm just gonna hold off on the language of that ordinance until I have a chance to discuss it with Captain Richards, as he was not available tonight. So we're gonna keep our proposed ordinance at a future regular session meeting. And lastly, there was a co-motion made by Councilor Manning Martin and Councilor McGinn regarding access. There was a concern from a resident about access for emergency vehicles being obstructed on Shaw's Lane, Holton Street, and Fountain Street. There has been communication between the residents and Council Manning Martin in the mayor's office. The mayor once again was here. He filled in the committee regarding that they're working on getting the correct language for the ordinance so the proper signage can be done so that there will be access. We did hear from Chief Pasden, who had concerns about the hook and ladder truck being able to get on the street. So that is going to also remain in committee. They are working on that, and that should come out of committee with a ordinance in the short term. And that is all.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Manning Martin on Human Service.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Human Services Committee meeting took place this evening. Myself as chair, Councilors Melville, Councilor Mitsoulas, Councilor O'Neill, and Councilor Rossignol in attendance, as were the rest of the committee. And the mayor joined us with Director Curt Bellavance of Community Development, and the mayor gave us a the issue on the agenda was an update on the sale of Crowninshield, and the mayor gave us a very thorough review of what took place, and he very eloquently described a collective effort of state and city officials working and negotiating with on the wind development, purchasing the Crowninshield property in order for the affordable units and the residents of the tannery to be able to remain in their units. And the sale price was $37.5 million, and the mayor explained that the city will need to assist with $1.6 million, which he will be coming to the council for requesting CPA money and inclusionary zoning monies. And this sale will close in 210 days, so he expects that to take place sometime in the spring. And when that happens, this was a very good piece of news that he shared, was once it does close, then there'll be another 40-year restriction on the property, so that we won't have to worry about this for another 40 years. I will not be here then. Jim, you going to be here? Jim will probably be here. I will not be here. So that was very good news. So once the sale closes in the spring, there'll be another 40-year restriction as the one that just expired, which is why we found ourselves in this predicament. So it appears everything is working smoothly with a lot of hard work from everybody, and that was good news. So that is a report of committee, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving right along, we have, let me get glasses so I can see what I'm doing. Motion, orders, and resolutions. Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. No motions tonight. Thanks.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. No motions.
Councilor Gould.
Motions, Mr.
Councilor Sasslaw.
Yes, under suspension of rules, motion to receive item 8G and set up a special permit hearing.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Under suspension of rules, motion to receive item 8I, 8J, 8K, and 8L, and send them to Industrial and Community Development Subcommittee.
You heard the motion. All in favor?
On the motion.
On the motion.
Yeah, could we be sure, it's going to be a little sensitive topic with me, but those are meaty discussions, and there's no way you can get any meaningful result in a half hour before a regular meeting, so you can pretty much count that that's a full night worth of discussion. And I think for the benefit of the council as a whole, so that we can come to that meeting focused on those zoning pieces. As a person who did the zoning before, I found it quite beneficial when you had people had 100% of their attention on just those topics, and they weren't worried about other things that they had to deal with that night on a regular meeting night. So I would just ask that we schedule that ICD, if we could, Mr. Chairman, to be on an off night so that we can give it full focus and attention.
If I may, Tim, Sorry.
Councilor Gould.
Tim, can we do the 13th? Tuesday, the 13th?
Of November. I'll check the schedule. Yeah, we can. I'll check the schedule.
We could do the 6th, but that's election day, and
Yeah, the 6th is
we
not
meet the 8th and the 15th, right?
We meet the 8th and 15th back-to-back for our regular meetings.
Do you have any subcommittee meetings scheduled on either the 8th or the 15th?
Yes.
Okay. Is one day lighter than the other?
Probably the 15th, but I don't know if you'll have enough time.
No,
You'll
Councilor
have-
Gravel makes a great point. I mean,
Yeah, so. the
that's an
first-
hour and a half.
The first Thursday in December is going to possibly be a tax classification hearing. Then our last regular meeting right now is December 13th.
So let's shoot for the 13th, and will you let us know, of November,
November.
which is a Tuesday,
Yes.
please? Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Gravel.
On the motion, can councilors please check your calendar? This is an important meeting, and I would like to make sure everyone could be there, so if the votes the next time, no one will miss out.
I'll check with Curt, see if he's...
Okay, yeah, also check with the Community Development Director to make sure he's available. This meeting is very important, and I'd like to make sure all councilors can be at all meetings. All right, on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Thank you for that, Councilor Gill. I appreciate that, and I agree, 100% agreement with you. And lastly, the only thing that has come up, and I think it's a positive thing, was the speed reader boards. I know we initially got 6. I think we put in for 12 last year. We talked a lot about traffic and speed and things of that nature, and I do recognize that we don't want to put them in neighbors' windows, but I really, I get a lot of activity on residents being concerned about speeding in their neighborhoods in those areas, and I know that the speed reader boards has been successful in my ward, and I just hope that we can continue to maybe get another 6, because I believe that there are probably at least 6 more locations that they can be permanently displayed. As I said, I know that we have the moving ones, and sometimes those work out well, sometimes they don't, but it's been very effective and positive in my ward, and I just wanted to share that with the other councilors. Thank you.
So, Councilor, if I may, I know, like you said, we had put in for 12 and got 6, and I think it was taken out of the budget, but, you know, the budget will be coming up again soon, so we may want to pay attention to that. And I think the ones that did get put up on the poles were designed to move themselves, too. They're not the ones on the wheel, but the ones on the pole. I believe the brackets were designed to move.
So, in that vein, Councilor, you know, I have discussed that, and let's just say that they're not as movable as I thought they were. You know, I thought that maybe we could buy brackets and move them. I haven't really received that warm and fuzzy from. You need to have to get the electric department involved to move them. Just in working in conversations I had with the police department, they really, to be quite frank with you, they didn't really want to move them. I don't know if it's an issue of manpower or they're up, but you know, I wouldn't mind moving them, but I know sometimes you move them and the people, and the roads that they're on usually are pretty high traveled roads, and they've been effective, but I'm not disagreeing with what you said. I'm just saying that I kind of talked about that, and I really didn't get that inclination that that was something that was being looked at, quite frankly. So, but I appreciate your sentiments, because I think now is I bring it up because we are coming up on budgets, and I think from what I hear from you, you agree, and it's been successful. And I'd like to see us maybe get another, you know, $10,000, $12,000. They're $2,000 to $3,000 a piece, depending on the vendor, but I think they've been very effective in my ward for sure. Thank you.
Councilor Moussoulis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under suspension of the rules, I'd like to go to item 8F, motion to receive and set up a public hearing.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Also, Mr. Chairman, I have a request from one of my constituents on the corner of Warren Street and Buxton Street. When you're going off Warren onto Buxton, the very corner, there's usually a car park there on both sides, and I'm making a request for public service to put up a sign saying no parking from here to corner. Enough room, leave enough space so a car doesn't park there. So moved, Mr. Chairman.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
And I also have a request from someone at 52 Garden Street to have Public Works go and check the sidewalk there, because I went there myself and there was a hole in the sidewalk. You could put your hand right down, and I'm not sure what it is. So just for safety of someone walking down the street, they won't break a leg or something. So I'd like to see Public Works go and check it out. So moved, Mr. Chairman.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Councilor Manning Martin.
No motions, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Rosenau.
No motions at this time.
Councilor Turco.
Mr. President, move to receive under suspension of the rules, item 8A.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
And, Mr. President, move to receive under suspension of the rules, item 8D.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Mr. President, in reference to 8D, Tim, if you could send a letter to John Bonaparte, President of Local 1202 from the Steelworkers, and John Carrillo from President Local 12003 on behalf of the City Council, let them know that we did vote unanimously to cease all non-emergency work from National Grid within the City of Peabody. I'm just not sure of the date. If you could provide that in the letter or email, whichever you prefer to send. Thank you.
On the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Councilor Turco, anything else?
That's all, Mr. President.
Councilor Melville.
No motions this evening.
Councilor Gravel.
Thank you. Under suspension of rules, move to receive item 7B and refer it to the Finance Subcommittee. So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
No further motions.
I just had a couple FYIs. This past Saturday, the rec department did a trunk or treat that they first time at the Higgins, handed to the rec department staff who put on such an excellent event. There wasn't a lot of trunks to be there, 10, 12 of them, but certainly a lot of children. And for the first year, getting it up and going, this is something very exciting. I think it can happen each and every year and get bigger and bigger. And just to show the residents here when people ask, what are we doing, what is the rec department doing for our kids, just another thing. Seems every year they just add another event to the schedule for families here in Peabody, and it was a great time. So just express next year, you folks check it out. We also had in Ward 4 the opening of the dog park, which is the first dog park in the city, and happens to be in my ward, and I couldn't be any more excited. It was a great event. A lot of people came. I drive by every day, and every time I go by, there's at least 2 to 3 dogs with their owners, obviously, enjoying the park. Again, just another addition to the city that makes this city so great that we have something for our pets to go to. Another FYI, J.B. Thomas Hospital, the last night, and they had a filming of one scene done there. I've talked to the people directly abutting the property. They had no issues. They were pretty excited that something like this was happening. The production company was excited to be here in Peabody. They talk a lot about Peabody to their counterpartners and other production personnel about coming here and doing things like this. I know we have it on our agenda. It's great for the hotels and restaurants and shops here in Peabody. So again, I'm glad to see that went without any major problems. With that being said, can I have a motion to accept 9A, 9B, 9C? Councilor Gravel?
Yes, taxi limousine driver's license, Kenneth Wright, license number 40, Robert Roost, license number 41, move to receive and approve, subject to all papers being in order.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Limousine license transfer, Michael's Limousine, 161 Lynn Street, license number 239. Move to receive and approve, subject to all papers being in order.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Item 9C is a banner request. There are actually 3 of them. Higgins Middle School PTO, 85 Perkins Street, the Progeria Research Foundation, 200 Lake Street, Unit 102, and St. Basilius Greek Orthodox Church, 5 Paleologos Street. Move to receive and approve, subject to all papers being in order.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? There's a vote. I think H.
Move to receive item 8H.
Just to receive? Motion to receive?
I think it was received, though, wasn't it?
Was it?
Yeah, that was already received. That was part of the grand
That whole
street
run?
control.
H was left out.
Okay. Move to receive 8H and refer it to the Industrial Community Development Committee.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Item 10A, move to receive, ready for council adoption, an ordinance amending section 1820, establishing a classification and compensation plan for the city officers and employees of the Code of the City of Peabody. Move to receive and adopt as advertised. So moved.
Like I have a roll call, a vote on this one. Councilor, Clerk, thank you.
Councilors O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gould. Sasla.
Yes.
Manning Martin. Rozignol.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Gravel.
Yes.
Charis.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0, 1 absent.
Motion to
Thank you,
adjourn.
councilors.
Mr. President? Yeah, move to receive late communication for a banner request from Mass Special Olympics, 6 Allen's Lane, and approve, all subject to all papers being in order. So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I think we might have missed item 8E as in Edward, and refer that to, that was on the Municipal Safety Committee agenda tonight, so move to receive and refer to.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Good night, folks. Thank you.